Chapter 569. Li Hongyuan opened his eyes. However, they were as dark as a pool, bottomless. There was no trace of the warmth that he should naturally show when he heard about Jingwan. If Jingwan suddenly stood in front of him, she might think that he had changed. The people around Li Hongyuan were in a state of extreme tension from morning to night. That kind of oppression seemed to be able to suffocate people at any time. Even if their master didn't say or do anything, just a glance from him would make you feel like you were stripped naked and placed in a world of ice and snow. That kind of feeling of being frozen from the inside out would make you lose all ability to think and move, and become a little lamb at the mercy of others. Before their master married Wang Fei, he was also very terrifying. He was ruthless and unpredictable, but at least he made people feel that he was still a human. But now he really didn't seem like a human but a true heartless devil. Even if he was terrifying, he was still human. No matter how terrifying a person was, most of the time he was normal and reasonable. They were shadow guards, men of sacrifice. Everything belonged to their master. When they faced their master, there was no fear. No matter what he did, in their eyes they could accept it. It was a normal thing. But now it was completely different. They were on the verge of death all the time. It was not a clean death, but a death of torture and fear that made even their souls tremble. There was no time like this when they wished for Wang Fei to be here. However, they were also very worried. Was Wang Fei really suitable to see the current Wang Ye? Even if Wang Fei had an unparalleled position in Wang Ye's heart, even if the whole world added together couldn't compare to her. Wang Fei occupied all of Wang Ye's heart. But what if Wang Ye didn't have a heart? Did that mean that in Wang Ye's eyes Wang Fei was the same as other people? Wang Fei and Wang Ye were deeply in love. Because nothing major happened, there was no situation where they would accompany each other in life and death. However, they were very clear that if there really was such a time, they would definitely be together until death. It could be seen that if Wang Ye broke off his feelings for Wang Fei, how big of a blow would it be to her? Wang Fei's current situation was special. Under such a big shock, it was possible that, however, they still had hope in their hearts. Even now, the princess consort was special in the prince's heart. His Highness was afflicted with the love-sealing goo, which sealed the master of another female goo that was paired with the love-sealing goo. Under normal circumstances, after being afflicted with such a goo, His Highness would only think of the other goo's master. He would be obedient to her and would be indifferent to everyone else. However, His Highness's current situation was that he treated everyone the same. There was no such special uniqueness. The love-sealing goo was really just a love-sealing goo. The owner of the female goo tried to get close to him, but she almost lost her life. If it wasn't for the fact that the female goo had absolute control over the male goo, if the male goo's owner had any thoughts of harming the female goo, it would immediately bite back. Because of the bite back, that woman escaped from the hands of the prince. However, they couldn't do anything to that woman. Not to mention that the male goo would control its master to protect the female goo, which was even more powerful than the love-sealing goo. It wasn't completely ineffective on its master. It would occasionally work. In addition, it was said that the woman had a type of substitute goo, which was the mother goo. The owner of the child goo would take the outside world's harm on her behalf. The child goo was in the princess consort's body. Although they were skeptical of this theory, after witnessing the strangeness of goo these days, they would rather believe it than not. Therefore, they were in a passive position now. However, they weren't completely passive. At least, they knew about the princess consort's situation. They weren't as ignorant as some people thought. It was obvious that His Highness valued and was loyal to the princess consort. Even if he trusted Master Liaochen, it was impossible for him to not have any protection. However, these people were hidden in the dark. On one hand, they were protecting the princess consort, and on the other hand, they were monitoring to find the traitor. Therefore, it was a joke that the news of Jingwan waking up couldn't be spread. Perhaps they couldn't know where Li Hongyuan was, but they had special channels to pass on information. The development of the situation was just a matter of following the trend. What's the situation? His voice was cold, as if he was asking about something ordinary. The person who came in lowered his eyes and gave a simple account of what had happened. He didn't need to look to know his current expression. In the past, if His Highness heard that another man had approached the princess consort with ill intentions, His Highness would definitely fly into a rage and tear him to pieces. But now there was no reaction at all. It was obvious how abnormal this was. Under normal circumstances, Even if a man didn't have feelings for his wife, he would still be possessive and wouldn't tolerate others touching her. Why didn't he have any reaction? Was it because he didn't care at all? If that was the case, His Highness should have ordered the death of the female goo poison's owner. The male goo poison's owner was absolutely loyal to the female goo poison's owner and would protect her without question. But if the female goo poison died, the male goo poison would die with her. This was probably because the woman who created the goo poison wanted a man to have absolute feelings for her and didn't want to drag him down with her because she loved him. As long as he didn't do it himself, everything would be fine. According to His Highness's personality, how could he be willing to be controlled by others? He was only affected by the goo poison's owner's emotions, not his personality. In fact, without the goo poison's shackles he would only be more unscrupulous. But he didn't. Except for the time when the female goo poison's owner wanted to get close to him, he didn't do anything else. Was he affected by the goo poison, or was he still concerned about the princess consort's safety? Li Hongyuan closed his eyes again. Get ready. We'll settle this tomorrow. Yes, master. Put out the lights and get out. The three of them didn't make a sound. They quietly put out the lights, went out and closed the door. Li Hongyuan was in the dark. His situation wasn't very good. The goo poison's influence was actually more serious than his subordinates expected. The reason why he was completely cold like ice was that he couldn't easily affect his emotions. Once his emotions fluctuated, the goo poison's influence would be aggravated. If it was aggravated, it meant that he might inexplicably have feelings for the female goo poison's owner, which was something Li Hongyuan was very resistant to. He only had his emotions locked, not his memory. Perhaps he couldn't feel his love for Jingwan, but the bits and pieces of his time with Jingwan were very clear memories. If he looked at those memories without emotions, he couldn't be completely indifferent. On the contrary, perhaps because he had his emotions locked, he didn't have any emotions to restrain his abnormal possessiveness. He wanted to lock Jingwan up. Therefore, how could he not care about the person who dared to peep at Jingwan? It was just the first time he lost control of his emotions and he was almost controlled by the goo poison. Therefore, he had been suppressing himself and suppressing his emotions in all aspects. This was similar to the state when Jingwan fell into a deep sleep. He was extremely tense. That kind of feeling was definitely uncomfortable. If one's willpower wasn't extremely strong, it was absolutely impossible to do it. It should be known that according to the history of the barbarians, the goo poison had been around for thousands of years, and there had never been a precedent of failure. There were many strong-willed bigwigs, but in the end they couldn't escape from it. It was like an instinct of an irrational beast. Li Hongyuan slept very little at night, even less than before he married Jingwan. Moreover, it was very light. Even if he slept, he was only in a half-awake state. This was because he was in a dream now and his emotions in the dream were very strong. The suppression was too strong. Li Hongyuan's face was like an iceberg, but under the ice layer, it was like a volcano erupting to the extreme. The ice layer outside was very hard, but in fact it was also very fragile. If it really succeeded immediately, she would be disappointed. She liked challenging things. And these days she didn't give up. On one hand, she used various methods to influence him, and on the other hand, she waited quietly. She originally thought that the best opportunity would be when the Jean Princess Consort appeared. To be honest, to let that woman, who seemed to be soaking in a honey pot, watch helplessly as her husband hugged another woman and whispered sweet words to her. That helpless and disbelieving look made people feel exceptionally happy. But she didn't expect this opportunity to be brought forward. But this was also good. Are you sure you want to stop me? Your master isn't in a good condition now. However, the secret guards guarding the door were still indifferent. Even if they didn't completely doubt her words, they didn't intend to move aside. All right, I'll wait here. Anyway, the longer I delay, the higher my chances of success. The woman smiled gently and elegantly, which didn't match that face of hers. Others might feel that her charm was boundless, but those who had a clear mind only felt that it was strange and unpredictable. The female goo that activated the love-locking goo poison continuously influenced the male goo. The male goo's reaction became more and more intense, and Li Hongyuan's suppression on it seemed to be weakening bit by bit. It was like an invisible war. On the other side, Jingwan once again fell into a half-awake state. Dreams came one after another. No matter what kind of dream it was, as the person in the dream, even though the sun was shining brightly, the environment wasn't very clear or bright. However, Jingwan's dream this time was a little unusual. She didn't know where she was, it seemed like she was running for her life. There were people around her and they were doing their best to protect her. One by one they died. As for her, even though she was pregnant, she was still skilled in archery and horse riding. However, because she had been running around for a long time, she didn't have a fixed place to stay. She couldn't eat or sleep well and her body gradually couldn't bear it. She became thinner and thinner. If it wasn't for her good foundation, she might have lost her child long ago. Under such circumstances, the child was born prematurely and in the end, it was difficult to give birth. In the middle of nowhere, there were only guards around her who didn't know anything about this. She couldn't give birth to the child and in the end she chose to cut open her stomach. Jingwan held her stomach. She didn't know when, but fine beads of sweat had appeared on her forehead. Her mouth overflowed with painful moans. She seemed to know that she was dreaming, but she couldn't wake up. Moreover, it was clearly a dream, but she seemed to feel a sharp pain. Heimei was guarding outside. How could she not sense anything at this time? She hurriedly opened the small door made of branches. The fire outside was cast in and Jingwan's happy face was clearly shown. "Your Highness," Sister Hei panicked. Your Highness, how are you? Where are you feeling unwell? Your Highness, don't scare this servant, Your Highness." Sister Hei was very regretful, very regretful. Why didn't she learn something in this area? Otherwise, she wouldn't be unable to do anything at this time. How could such a movement not attract attention? Sun Yilin and Fu Rong quickly came over. The worry and anxiety on their faces were not fake. Heimei was like a mother hen protecting her calf. They were not allowed to get close at all. "Heimei, don't be capricious. Now Princess and the child are more important," Fu Rong softly advised. Heimei stared at her angrily. She wanted to ask her who she was showing her attitude to. Wasn't she the one who took Princess out of White Dragon Temple? If Princess stayed in White Dragon Temple, how could such a thing happen? However, Heimei also knew the severity of the matter at this time, so she didn't argue with them. The simple hut was quickly and carefully opened. Sun Yilin carefully lifted Jingwan's upper body, took out a medicine and was about to feed it to Jingwan. But he heard a sound. A short arrow was shot from the dark and directly shot through Sun Yilin's hand. The medicine in his hand naturally fell to the ground. Sun Yilin groaned in pain and then there was a small sound in the forest. Before other people could react, the black shadows in the forest rushed out one after another. Dozens of people quickly controlled the scene. Just by looking at their movements, they knew that they were definitely not ordinary people. In addition to the initial groan, Sun Yilin's other hand was holding Jingwan steadily. He turned a blind eye to the bloody hand and the arrow in his hand. One of the black-clad people went straight to Sun Yilin, with an indescribable cold breath. Compared with others, there was no bloody smell. However, the momentum was absolutely not to be underestimated. The footsteps were steady and powerful. When the other party came closer, Sun Yilin saw clearly that it was a woman. Judging from her appearance, she was at most in her early 30s, but it was difficult to judge her age from her behavior. However, the other party seemed to give him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. She quickly took out the medicine and quickly fed it into Jingwan's mouth. During this time, Heimei subconsciously tried to stop her, but she couldn't stop her at all. Heimei was so anxious that her eyes turned red. In a situation where she had no choice, she could only watch Sun Yilin feed Wang Fei the medicine. At least she could feel that Sun Yilin wouldn't really hurt Wang Fei, but this unknown person. "Who are you? What did you feed Wang Fei?" If she wasn't firmly suppressed, Heimei probably would have hit her directly. "Heimei, you knew that Princess left White Dragon Temple but you didn't stop her. This crime I will go back and reason with you." This voice couldn't be more familiar. Heimei was a little sluggish. Mama. Mama Gong snorted coldly and ignored her. "Young master son, please step aside." Along the way she didn't know how many times she wanted to rush out and chop Sun Yilin directly. In fact, Sun Yilin was not surprised by the appearance of this group of people. Thinking about it, a person like Li Hongyuan could deceive everyone. How could his mind be so meticulous? How could he let them take Princess out of White Dragon Temple so easily? It made sense that there were people secretly protecting her along the way. And it was very likely that he had his own reasons for letting Princess leave White Dragon Temple. And if he really did something to Jingwan along the way, he would probably be dead. Jingwan moved from Sun Yilan's arms to Mama Gong's arms. Mama Gong took Jingwan's pulse and carefully touched her belly and lower body. She could feel that the child was moving and her lower body was not wet. She was slightly relieved. There should be no blood. However, she couldn't let her sleep like this. Princess Consort, Princess Consort. She gently tried to wake her up. But it obviously didn't work. Mama Gong was worried that Princess had been poisoned again. Jingwan was suddenly trapped in the dream, and her body swayed uneasily. Princess, Princess, wake up, wake up. Let me take you to His Highness. You will see His Highness soon. Princess. Sun Yilan saw this and heard Jingwan call A Yuan again and again. If she didn't love him to the core, she wouldn't be like this. He lowered his eyes and pulled out the arrow in his hand expressionlessly. Then he walked to one side, casually applied some medicine and tore a piece of white cloth to wrap it. That was all. He glanced at Jingwan, who was still in the dream and didn't know what she was dreaming about. Some things, even if he didn't want to believe it, were the truth. The others were all detained, but those who resisted were killed directly. Of course, there was no trace of blood left. Anyway, they now knew the specific location of their master, and these people were worthless. As for Sun Yilan, he didn't do anything to him, not knowing whether it was because of his cleverness or other reasons. Outside Li Hongyun's room, the woman in a foreign dress smiled brighter and brighter. She was so happy that she was about to seize the fruit of victory, and the bell in her hand was ringing. At a certain moment her smile widened again. She thought to herself, it's done. However, in an instant her smile froze on her face. Wan Wan, Li Hongyun's voice suddenly sounded in the room. The people outside, whether it was the woman or Li Hongyun's subordinates, were all in disbelief. The woman spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body swayed slightly and she almost fell to the ground. She couldn't believe that she had succeeded, but the male parasite was completely suppressed. Not only that, the male parasite almost died, which affected the female parasite in her body and caused her to be injured. The female parasite wanted the male parasite's absolute loyalty and love, but she gave the male parasite her own life. That's right, if the female parasite died, the male parasite was unaffected. On the other hand, if the male parasite died, the female parasite died. As for the latter, they didn't know what had happened to make their master let out such a miserable and desperate cry. Granny Gong worked tirelessly and Jingwan suddenly woke up. Her eyes were filled with extreme pain, and tears fell from the corners of her eyes drop by drop. Jingwan didn't recover for a long time. Princess Consort, Princess Consort. Granny Gong was very worried. Chapter 570. Jingwan raised her head mechanically and looked at the familiar yet strange face in front of her. She then recognized who it was. Nanny, I heard A Yuan calling me. Her tears were still falling drop by drop. Nanny Gong didn't know what she dreamed of that made her so sad. It made one's heart ache. Don't be sad, princess. We will see His Highness soon. After a long while, Jingwan finally recovered. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and calmed down. However, even if she took the pregnancy medicine, the effect was not so fast. She still felt a little uncomfortable now, so she still leaned on Nanny Gong and didn't move. She stroked her belly from time to time. As she slowly recalled the dream, she suspected that it might not have been a simple dream. Regarding her husband's past life, even though he did not explain it to her in detail and only mentioned it vaguely, she seemed to be able to make some connections now. Perhaps it was something that he had experienced in his past life. It might be a little absurd to think like this, but Jingwan felt that it was the truth. It was the truth. She could feel the pain and sadness in such a tragic end in the dream. What about the person who experienced it bit by bit? This was not the most important thing. Even if she died tragically, she was still dead. The person who was really suffering was the one who was alive. Her family didn't know what happened, so it might be better. But what about him? Jingwan didn't dare to imagine how she survived that period of time. If it were her, she might have completely collapsed, let alone become the emperor and create a prosperous dynasty. At that time she might not have understood his deep feelings. She didn't know what he had experienced after her death. But from her point of view now, it was a very cruel thing to entrust the child to him and ask him to take care of the child. What was left could be a spiritual sustenance, or the real culprit who opened the scars again and again. Tears unconsciously rolled in her eyes again. Your Highness. Mama Gong called out worriedly. At this time, even though Nanny Gong was dressed in black, She was not the fierce female protector. Instead, she had been by Jingwan's side for a long time. Even though she was strict and proper, her aura was gentle. No matter how one looked at her, she did not look like a decisive person. I'm fine. Jingwan rubbed her eyes and held back her tears. Mama, let's go find His Highness now. She couldn't wait any longer. She couldn't suppress her longing for him anymore. At this moment it completely exploded. She wanted to see him. Every cell in her body was clamoring to see him. She wanted 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 to see him. Okay, let's go now. At this time, naturally, whatever Jingwan said was the truth. No one had the heart to go against her wishes. However, Jingwan's condition didn't seem to have recovered completely. Under such circumstances, there was still a huge risk for her to go on the road. They had to take care of her emotions, but they couldn't ignore her health. For a moment they were in a dilemma. When Mama Gong gently stroked her belly, Jingwan realized that what she needed now was rest. She unconsciously clenched her fists. In the end, she suppressed the intense longing again. This might be the only child between her and A Yuan. If it was gone, there probably wouldn't be another one in the future. Mama, do you have anything on you that can calm me down? Rest for another 2 hours. It was good that Jingwan could control her emotions. Yes, Your Highness. Rest assured. When it's time, I'll call you. Jingwan nodded, closed her eyes, and tried to empty her mind as much as possible. It was not an easy thing to do. However, as the saying goes, a mother is strong. When there was no one to rely on, she would be tenacious and have extraordinary perseverance. Li Hongyuan knew the Luo Jingwan best in his previous life. No matter how she changed on the outside, she never changed on the inside. Under the effect of the calming incense, Jingwan fell into a deep sleep. This time she didn't have any dreams. It seemed that she slept very well. During this process, Mama Gong had been paying attention to Jingwan's situation. Fortunately, she had gradually stabilized. Mama Gong put her hand on Jingwan's belly. Good child, now you know how to care for your mother. As if in response to her words, she felt a slight squirming under her belly. This time, Nurse Gong smiled very sincerely. Regardless of whether it was the little heir or the little Canton princess, he would be the most outstanding and filial child. When 2 hours were up, they confirmed that Jingwan had almost recovered. Although she was still far from her peak state, it was not something that could be recovered in a short time. She needed a quiet and stable environment to recuperate slowly. Obviously, such conditions did not exist now. It was better to settle the matter as soon as possible and return to the capital. When Jingwan woke up, she found that during this period of time, they had made a sedan chair. Although it looked simple, it was as delicate as possible. It was cushioned with a thick and soft blanket, so there was no need to worry about its warmth or comfort. Mama Gong did not let Jingwan get up. She directly carried Jingwan and put her on the sedan chair. After tucking in the corner of the blanket, Mama Gong made a silent gesture. 4 people came forward and lifted the sedan chair. Then the surrounding scenery began to recede. The speed of receding was quite fast. However, Jingwan did not feel the slightest bump. As for Mama Gong, she was by her side and remained relatively still. She didn't even move up or down. It was obvious that the 4 sedan bearers were walking at the same pace. She was also walking at the same pace as them. Seeing this, Jingwan's heart relaxed a little. With these people around, it meant that her husband had already made arrangements. In that case, his own safety shouldn't be a problem. Your Highness, we are going a little too fast now. You may feel dizzy. Take a rest. Soon we will see His Highness. Mama Gong said softly. Okay. She could feel that things might have really reached the most critical stage. Now there was no point in thinking too much. Things should be as they were, one step at a time. Thinking about things before reaching that stage seemed to be of no use other than wasting her mind. And right now the taboo thing for her was probably worrying. As for Sun Yilin, Jingwan did not want to think about it anymore. It did not matter whether he had a reason or not. Some things were done. After all, Jingwan had already thought it through. Even if her husband wanted to kill her, she would not frown, let alone now. Therefore, no matter what his ending was, she would accept it. No, it had nothing to do with her. When the time came, the only thing she could do was to hide his actions and not let him implicate Sun Yijia. Sun Yijia was her sister-in-law, her best friend, and the mother of her nephew and niece. Sun Yijia did not know anything about Sun Yilin. He was living a good life now. She should not be implicated by Sun Yilin. Even though in this feudal dynasty, there were many cases of guilt by association, Jingwan was at most half a native of Qiyuan. As long as she had the memory of her previous life, she could not be completely assimilated into this society. In her previous life, no matter how heinous the crime was, there was no mention of the family members being implicated. However, if the matter was too serious, Jingwan would not be able to bear no grudges against her sister-in-law like before. After all, when she saw her, she would inevitably think of Sun Yilin. Not being implicated did not mean that she would not vent her anger. She was not a saint. She was not close to Sun Yijia, but she was not closer to her husband. Sometimes, it was already the limit to be able to control her emotions and not vent it on the innocent. Therefore she could only hope that things would not be too bad. Jingwan inadvertently looked up at the sky. It seemed that the sky was about to brighten. It seemed that tonight was much faster than she thought. Yuan, Li Hongyuan's current situation was not good. He was trapped in the dream. Once again he clearly experienced the darkest and most painful period. Did he and Jingwan enter the same dream, or was it a coincidence that they had the same dream at the same time? However, now no one could get close to him. Although he was still leaning against the wall with his eyes closed without any movement and even his breathing was very weak, his attack power was actually very terrifying. It was as if he had lost his mind. He attacked indiscriminately. Whoever got close to him would die. Even if Gong Jia wanted to help him, there was nothing he could do. Therefore he could only watch helplessly. As for the woman, she had already been thrown far away by the people around Li Hongyuan. Although their actions were gentle because of the substitute gu, it was also a fact that she was thrown away. A woman being treated like this was as embarrassing as it could be. Unfortunately, even though Li Hongyuan was currently being controlled, anyone by his side could not be underestimated. Furthermore, this was the Qiyuan region. Even if it was an unknown desolate mountain or forest, it was still Li Hongyuan's territory. Even if the other party had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, they would not dare to easily do anything to this group of killing gods. Thus, after that woman was injured and embarrassed, she was so angry that her face turned ashen and she gnashed her teeth. In the end, she could only forcefully endure it. Naturally, the determination and hatred in her eyes became even more obvious and intimidating. Li Hongyuan's secret guards saw that this woman was not so simple. Looking at her, she might even have a grudge against their master. Moreover, her obsession seemed to be a little too deep. This was even more strange. However, they were very clear that they had never seen such a woman around their master. This could only mean that her face did not belong to her. Or she had a very close relationship with someone who had a deep relationship with their master. Perhaps there would be an answer to these questions soon. Even if there was no answer, it did not matter. No matter if it was love or hatred, it was all settled. It was not a big deal. Who would care about who she was? The woman returned to her room and smashed everything in the room. Her anger seemed to have distorted her whole face. However, as she smashed, she suddenly stopped. She felt a burning pain on her face. Then her face suddenly oozed blood and seemed to be eroding little by little. She covered her face with her hands in horror and hurriedly put on her gauze hat. Guards, guards, bring a sacrifice from the dungeon. Hurry, hurry, she was furious and anxious. A woman's voice came from outside. However, it was not the official language of Qiyuan. It did not seem to be a common local language in Qiyuan. It should be a more minority language. It might not even exist in Qiyuan. Soon there was a noise outside. A beautiful girl who looked to be at most 13 or 14 years old, was dragged in by two women who were also wearing alien costumes. They threw her to the ground rudely. The girl probably knew what was going to happen to her. From her eyes to her expression, she was full of deep fear. However, she could not speak. She could only make whimpering sounds from her throat. She knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Even if she could not speak, it was obvious that she was begging for mercy. The woman bent down. Kodan's hand, which was as red as blood, pinched the girl's chin. However, that hand, which should have been smooth, delicate, and beautiful, now looked like it had shrunk. Blue veins bulged out. Her skin was dry and dull and there were slight wrinkles. It's your honor to be my sacrifice. But you don't have to be so excited. The woman's other hand was gently caressing the girl's face. You're really beautiful. However, you're also really annoying. It was as if she was whispering to her lover. However, the woman's fingernails scratched the girl's face. From light red marks to bloody marks, the girl's eyes were filled with fear and pain. Perhaps it was because of the deep fear that she could not move, but her body was trembling uncontrollably. Perhaps it was because of the sweet blood on the girl's face, but the woman's arms suddenly moved. Gradually, on the inner side of her wrist, a large bulge appeared. Her skin was pushed open and it even seemed a little translucent. When it was pushed to a certain extent, it broke open with a bang. A dark mass of something crawled out from inside. Upon closer inspection, it looked like a spider covered in fine fur. And because the girl's line of sight was the closest, she seemed to vaguely see a human face on the spider. She was originally just an ordinary peasant girl. Because her family was relatively wealthy, she had always been pampered. She was innocent and naive. One day she was deceived and kidnapped. Soon she knew the fate that she might face. Because she had seen it more than once in front of her. She had been terrified all day, hoping that she could be rescued until this moment. The last desire to live made her struggle with all her might. She suddenly exerted force. The hand that was pinching the girl's chin directly cut through her skin. Blood flowed out, causing the spider to become even more restless. And because of the other party's resistance, the woman became angry. She grabbed the girl's hair and directly stuffed the spider into the girl's mouth. "I gave you face, but you don't want it." The girl was still struggling. However, the struggle now was perhaps not just for the sake of survival. However, the skin of the woman who was separated from the spider became worse and worse. If it was only a young woman, then a middle-aged woman, then perhaps she had already become an old woman. It was just that no one could see her face, so no one knew how terrifying she had become. However, because of that change, the woman became more and more irritable. The young life under her hand became the target of her venting. She pinched and kicked like a crazy woman. And the girl gradually stopped struggling. She aged visibly until she looked like she was 70 or 80 years old. And finally, the woman released her hand in disgust. The old girl, who only had one last breath left, fell to the ground. Then a bright red spider crawled out from her collar. Compared to the black spider from before, it was more than a size bigger. Following the woman's extended hand, it crawled back into her body. The wound on her wrist instantly disappeared without a trace. And the originally aged skin also became smooth and elastic again. Her hand was also slender and jade-like fingers. During the entire process, the woman seemed as if she had eaten a celestial medicine. She let out sighs that could cause one's bones to soften. And the evil aura on her body also disappeared without a trace because she had recovered her youthful beauty. She took off her veil and smiled. She was still that peerless beauty that could cause one's soul to turn upside down. Without needing her to say anything, the girl on the ground was dragged out like filth. "Get ready, I want to take a bath," the woman said with a bit of laziness. And the two women serving by the side narrowed their eyes. "Saintess, do you want to take a normal bath, or do I even need to say this kind of thing? What use do I have for you?" The laziness instantly turned sharp. "Saintess, please forgive us. We will go and prepare for the saintess." The two begged for forgiveness in fear, then hurriedly left, afraid that the saintess would use them to feed the beauty goo if they were a step late. Beauty goo, as the name implied, could make an ugly person beautiful, and could also make a person maintain their youthful beauty. However, from the actions of that so-called saintess earlier, it could be seen how cruel the method to maintain one's beauty was. For the beauty goo to be effective, it needed to be fed with young and beautiful women, and those unmarried beautiful women were the best choice. The more beautiful the sacrifice was, the longer the user could maintain their beauty. However, no matter how beautiful the sacrifice was, it would only be effective for a month at most. After the effect was over, the user would have to eat more sacrifices. However, as the number of sacrifices increased, the effect would gradually weaken. And as the user's age increased, the effect would also weaken. In the end, a life might only last for 2 or 3 days or even 2 or 3 lives at a time. It was enough to show how vicious this beauty goo was. And those who used the beauty goo to maintain their beauty had already surpassed the category of humans. They were worse than beasts. And this saintess was actually not very old, only in her 20s. One sacrifice could maintain her beauty for a month, but she still wanted to use the blood bath. Blood bath naturally used blood, and the source of the blood was the same as the sacrifice. However, how much blood could a person have, and how many lives would be sacrificed in one blood bath? Although the effect of the blood bath was to maintain one's beauty, At the beginning of using the beauty goo, it could only be used as icing on the cake. Correspondingly, because the beauty goo was raised too well, the beauty goo would become greedy and want to eat more sacrifices and eat more frequently. This so-called saintess, when did she have the sudden urge to use a bloodbath? Such a person, words like snake, scorpion, and beast were no longer enough to describe her. A bathtub was quickly carried in. Then when she saw the amount of blood in the bathtub, the saintess was furious. Why is there so little blood? In fact, it was already quite a lot. If she sat in the bathtub, it would reach her lower abdomen. Saintess, please forgive us. There are no more sacrifices in the dungeon. This place is remote and there is no one around. The sacrifices were all found from other places. Because of the recent arrests, the Qiyuan authorities have been paying attention to the nearby places. Shut up, I don't want to listen to your explanations. No matter what method you use, continue to get me more sacrifices. Now it's time for you to sacrifice yourselves, the saintess said coldly. The two women's eyes were filled with deep fear and their bodies trembled slightly. However, they did not panic and quickly knelt down. It's our honor to sacrifice ourselves for the saintess. However, there are no other sisters around now. When the time comes, who will serve the saintess? The saintess knew that they were just making excuses, but it was the truth. She needed someone to serve her. I'll forgive you for now. Go and get some water to add to the bathtub. How am I supposed to bathe with so little blood? The effect of the blood would definitely be weakened if it was added to the bathtub. This made the saintess very unhappy. However, it was better than nothing. Thus, after she was ready, she submerged herself in. After a while, she slowly raised her head. Her face was covered in blood. It was disgusting no matter how one looked at it, but she enjoyed it. Perhaps it was the effect of the beauty parasite, but the blood gradually faded. In the end, it became clear water. The saintess stood up from the bathtub. She looked rosy and lustrous. Her skin was even better than the best silk. She used the softest cloth to dry it bit by bit. Standing in front of the mirror, she carefully observed her body inch by inch. It was as if she was looking at the most perfect piece of art. Narcissism might not be a big deal, but narcissism to a certain extent was no different from a pervert. However, it was already winter and there was definitely no heat in this thatched hut in the wilderness. Was she not afraid of the cold? The cold might be tolerable, but the changes in the body could not be eliminated just by tolerating it. However, this saintess was dressed very lightly before. Even those who practiced martial arts all year round had thicker clothes than her, but there was no change in her body. This was very abnormal. After using the blood to nourish her body, the injuries caused by the emotion-sealing parasite seemed to have disappeared. Chapter 571. After admiring his body, a deep darkness appeared in her eyes. She licked her blood-red lips and said, "Should I say, you are indeed the man that I have taken a fancy to. Even at this point you can still survive. Things are getting more and more interesting." She turned around and wanted to see her prey again. Even if she couldn't get close, the closer she got, the stronger the connection between the love-locking parasites would be. Of course, the love-locking parasites couldn't be more than 10 miles away from each other. The farther they were, the more irritable the parasites would be. Correspondingly, the master would also feel very uncomfortable. What's going on? I can't sense anything at all? It's impossible. How could this happen? The holy maiden frowned. Things seemed to be a little out of her expectations. She was originally very sure of this, but now she couldn't help but have a trace of doubt. In fact, from the beginning, some of the feelings that should have been pleasurable were not so penetrating. How should she put it? It was like the meridians all over her body. They should have been unobstructed, but some subtle places seemed to be blocked. She didn't know where exactly the blockage was. She ignored it because she couldn't find it, but now this feeling became stronger again. He had spent a lot of time and energy, but things didn't develop as expected. This was already annoying. If things went out of control, then it was even more intolerable. She took the risk again to get close to Li Hongyuan's house, but she was also mercilessly blocked. The holy maiden didn't advance rashly, but she also didn't retreat. At this moment it seemed that everyone was immobilized. They were motionless in their original positions. The sky was getting brighter. "Come in." In the house, Li Hongyuan finally spoke. As soon as he spoke, the world seemed to come alive. Even the holy maiden felt the existence of the male parasite in his body. In terms of perception, it wasn't that she didn't gain anything. At least the male parasite's control over him seemed to have increased. So, she must have thought too much before. Master. The person at the door hurried in. Prepare water for a bath. Previously he was not much different from being pulled out of the water. After sitting for so long his wet clothes seemed to have dried a lot. It was quite uncomfortable to stick to his body. Moreover, he was a bit of a neat freak. Li Hongyuan's bathing process was neither fast nor slow. It was quite normal. The only abnormal thing was that Gong Jia was serving him. However, since Eunuch Mu was not around, it seemed that anyone could serve him. Stepping out of the door, he welcomed the faint light of dawn. He was incomparably handsome and spirited. Perhaps because he was emotionless, he didn't seem to have the slightest bit of mortal aura. He was more and more like a god from the 9 heavens. When facing him, one only wanted to submit. He tilted his head and looked at the so-called saintess. Because of the emotion-sealing goo, they were supposed to be the closest people to each other. But now he was looking at her as if she was nothing. She herself was not so relaxed. No matter how proud and conceited she was, she could not help but tremble. Her legs went soft. If she did not grit her teeth and hold on, she might have made a fool of herself on the spot. It was as if he didn't take the other party seriously at all. For some people, what was even more intolerable than contempt was disregard, and this saintess was one of them. The trembling of his body became more and more obvious. This time it was due to anger. Tell the servants to prepare a meal for the princess. He had no feelings for her, but he still kept thinking about her. This made the saintess' heart burn with pain. Jealousy was about to drown her. However, no matter how turbulent her emotions were, they could not affect Li Hongyuan. Although her emotions actually affected the emotion-sealing goo in his body, what could she do? No matter how unwilling she was, there was nothing she could do. After coming to her senses, she suddenly realized that the Luo Jingwan was coming. She knew it clearly, but how did Li Hongyuan know it? Logically speaking, he shouldn't know. It was a surprise she prepared for him. Now, looking at the people around him, she found that they were not surprised at all. They looked calm, which showed that they had known the news for a long time. So, things were really beyond her expectation? Damn it. Calm down, calm down. Even if it was beyond her expectation, Luo Jingwan still had the substitute goo in his body. Therefore, even if things were not so perfect, she still had the initiative. They could not touch her. On the contrary, they had to protect her well. As long as she was alive, there would always be a chance to turn the tables. She had endured it time and time again. Back then, when she was in the most pain, she had endured it. So what if she endured it now? The meal was ready. Li Hongyuan also ate some. Compared to before, he ate more. Li Hongyuan put down his chopsticks and slowly wiped his hands with a handkerchief. He looked as if he had completely recovered his former elegance. There were no negative emotions, and he was no longer as cold as before. When the princess arrives, serve her the meal well. Then come to the back to find me. Yes. It was so normal that it was abnormal. During this period of time he had been abnormal. Suddenly he became normal. That was abnormal. Since the princess was here and she was still attentive and considerate, what was wrong with staying and waiting? Was it because they had no feelings for each other? Taking care of her was their former friendship, but he could not accompany her everywhere like before. In fact, Jingwan and the others were already outside the colonel. But because they did not know the situation inside, they did not act rashly for the time being. And the people outside had basically been dealt with. When they were discussing how to contact Li Hongyuan, the person in the call came out. It was the leader of the guards. Greetings, Your Highness. Normally, Jingwan's heart should have calmed down a little after seeing him. However, for some reason her heart was beating a little faster. It wasn't because of nervousness or excitement. It felt more like a bad feeling. Where is your prince? Is he okay now? This was the thing that worried Jingwan the most. As for the others, Your Highness, His Highness is fine. His Highness had ordered the servants to prepare breakfast. He was just waiting for you. Jingwan unconsciously clenched her fists. If so, he should have come to see her in person. But he did not. What is the situation? Tell me clearly. Don't hide anything. Actually, Guard Chen was not clear about his master's condition. So he said whatever he wanted to say. Except for the substitute goo, he did not hide anything. The reason why he hid the substitute goo was that he did not want her to feel burdened. But he did not expect that Jingwan actually knew. Emotion-locking goo. Damn it, Jingwan really did not hate those worms as much as she did at this moment. But he could resist such a domineering and strange thing. Jingwan felt warm and distressed. She knew that it was not easy to resist something that had never failed. Did he have no feelings for her anymore? Although Jingwan was a little sad, but it did not matter. It could be solved. Moreover, if a sincere relationship could be easily swayed by a worm, it would be too childish. If it could be swayed by external things, it could only mean that it was not real enough, not deep enough. She believed in him. Jingwan loosened her clenched fists and lightly exhaled. Then let's go in. She wanted to see who was coveting her husband. Jingwan's reaction was out of guard Qian's expectation. But after thinking carefully, it seemed that it was understandable. Their feelings were sincere and their trust for each other was incomparable. With guard Qian leading the way, the journey was smooth and unobstructed. But it was someone who thought of ways to bring her here. There was really no reason to stop her. Moreover, the initiative was in their hands. Perhaps they did not even care whose hand she was in now. There was nothing special about the colonel basically, it was obvious at a glance. Why did the other party choose such a place? Jingwan did not believe that there was no reason. Jingwan originally thought that her husband, even if he did not go out to pick her up, should be the first to see her after she came in. But now there was not even a shadow of him. And the person who carried the female goo of the emotion-locking spell was also not seen. However, according to Jingwan's estimation, the female goo of the substitute goo in her body should also be with that woman. Because only in this way many things would make sense. Regarding this point, guard Qian hid it from her and she did not intend to ask. After entering the room and seeing the food on the table, Jingwan still did not see the person she wanted to see most. The bad feeling intensified again. Where is your prince? Where is he now? It was reasonable that he did not go to pick her up. But how could he explain, avoiding question mark? Prince is at the back of the room. You can eat first. I will take you there later. There's no need. I'll see him first. This person was just inches away. If he didn't see him, how could he eat? Princess. When Jingwan turned around, guard Qian reached out to stop her. Please forgive me, princess. Prince asked me to invite you to eat first. Don't worry, Prince will be waiting. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think about the child in your belly. Jingwan looked at him. Even if she had to eat regularly, now it was just a short time. If he insisted that she eat before going, then there might be a reason why she could not eat after seeing him. Guard Qian felt his scalp tingle under Jingwan's gaze, but he was still determined not to give in. Jingwan did not make things difficult for him. She sat down and began to eat. She waved her hand and did not ask Nanny Gong to serve her. It was just a small square table and she was alone. There was no need to ask others to serve her. It was not as exquisite as the food in the prince's mansion, and it was not as delicious. However, to Jingwan now, everything she ate was the same. Tasted like wax, but she still ate as much as she could. She did not want to think so much about the why. Anyway, she would know in a while, right? However, as she ate, the tears in Jingwan's eyes rolled down her cheeks. She didn't seem to notice it and continued to stuff food into her mouth. She clearly didn't swallow the food in her mouth. She clearly had good dining etiquette, but now she didn't seem to care about her image and was in a sorry state. Princess, Nanny Gong called out, trying to stop her. It was better not to eat at all. However, Jingwan did not seem to hear her. Her movements were mechanical. When she tried to swallow, she could not swallow and spit it out. Wangfei Mama Gong hurriedly supported her. She took the chopsticks in her hand and patted her back. If you can't eat, then don't eat. Later, Wang Ye will accompany you to eat. Mama Gong really wanted to ask, why was Wang Ye avoiding her? Being stared at by the female guard, Guard Qian was under a lot of pressure. He also wanted to know why. Nanny, I don't want to cry really, but I can't control it. Sometimes people's grievances came so inexplicably. No matter how much she tried to prepare herself, it was useless. It's okay. A woman is pregnant and her emotions are changeable. She can do whatever she wants. Granny Gong had been by Jingwan's side for so many years, but she had never seen her so fragile. In the past 2 days she had shed more tears than she had in the past. Madame Luo had said that her princess consort had never cried much when she was young. She was probably the child who cried the least in the world. Now, she wasn't hysterical and there wasn't much emotion in her eyes, but it was enough to break anyone's heart. After vomiting, she rinsed her mouth and wiped her face. After crying, she seemed to have cried all her emotions away. Jingwan sat upright and looked at Guard Qian. "I've eaten." Before Guard Qian could react, Nanny Gong's knife-like gaze had already turned to him. "Hurry up and lead the way." Guard Qian felt a little wronged. He did not say that he would not lead the way. Unfortunately, he could only think about it in his heart and did not dare to talk back. Not to mention Nanny Gong, even he could not bear to see the princess in this state. Behind the hut, there was a relatively flat piece of land with 2 trees. Li Hongyuan was sitting under one of the trees. In front of him was a small table with a zither on it. However, what was unbelievable was that the saintess was leaning on him as if she had no bones. The back window of the hut was actually open, but it was not closed. What happened inside, not to mention Li Hongyuan, even the saintess heard it. In her eyes, Li Hongyuan looked indifferent on the surface, but his clenched fists, the bulging veins on the back of his hands, and the restless male venomous insect in his body all showed that he was not calm at all. Even in this state he could still have a reaction. The feelings between them were indeed so deep that it was unbelievable. Was this really the living king of hell in the past? It was obvious that everyone revolved around him, but he gave his heart completely to a woman. This was something that she did not dare to hope for in the past. Although some things were just guesses, the facts proved that her guesses were right. His control over the male venomous insect had increased a little. Yes, it was really something to be happy about. As expected, the opportunity came when our Jean Princess Consort appeared. However, when others were in pain, she was happy. With a happy mood, she curled up a strand of Li Hongyuan's hair and brushed it gently beside his ear. He was the one who pulled her to his side. She could not even be within 3 steps of him for such a long time, but he took the initiative to reach out to her. Who would believe that there was nothing fishy about it? However, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Even if she knew that he had an ulterior motive, she could not let it go. Li Hongyuan loosened his fist and began to play the zither. Even if he wanted to tear the woman lying on his shoulder into pieces, he resisted the urge to kick her away. Moreover, the influence of the emotion-locking goo on him was getting stronger, but he did not want to do anything. Perhaps it was because of the emotion locking he did not feel any heartache. However, there was still a very uncomfortable feeling. Perhaps it was even more uncomfortable than direct heartache. Bypassing the thatched hut, Jingwan stopped the moment she saw her husband. The people around her were shocked and could not believe it. They were even furious. Even if it was their master, their anger could not be quelled. If he had been controlled by the emotion-locking goo from the beginning, perhaps he would not be so angry. However, after so long, they knew that their master was indeed invincible. At this time, when the Princess Consort appeared, he gave them a head-on blow, making them dizzy and their brains buzzing. How could they not be angry? On the other hand, Jingwan seemed to be very calm. At least on the surface, no emotions could be seen. On the contrary, a certain holy maiden who was prepared to watch a good show was very disappointed. Clearly, she did not even have the appetite to eat because she did not see the Princess Consort. She was like a daughter flower, which made people very disdainful. Now she was so calm that it was frightening. Not to mention breaking down, her posture was still natural and upright. It was as if she would not move no matter how fierce the storm was. In such a short time, it was as if she had become a completely different person. It was really puzzling. Li Hongyuan also stopped playing the zither and met Jingwan's gaze without any ripples. The Princess Consort is here. Then, as if nothing had happened, he moved his gaze away and fell on the holy maiden beside him. He even reached out and touched the bell bracelet on her wrist. Jingwan lifted her feet and slowly walked over. She stood a few steps away from Li Hongyuan. "Your Highness, do you still remember what you said before?" Jingwan said calmly. She raised her right hand and touched the cuff of her left hand. "I have said many things. Your Highness, what are you referring to?" Li Hongyuan looked at her carelessly. Perhaps because he did not have feelings for her for the time being, Li Hongyuan could not see Jingwan's true feelings now. However, his intuition told him that his wife was very strange now. However, this was exactly what he wanted. Jingwan slightly tilted her head and smiled. "Then I will use practical actions to tell your Highness." Her smile did not fade. Step by step she approached Li Hongyuan. When she was behind him, she reached out and touched his neck gently with her fingertips. Her right hand suddenly pulled up the sleeve of her left hand and pulled out the dagger tied to her arm. She raised it and stabbed Li Hongyuan's heart. You said that my sincerity could be exchanged for your life. As long as you change your mind, I can take your life. Jingwan said softly, as if she was whispering the most intimate words to him when they were intimate. Things happened too quickly in the blink of an eye. Probably no one would have thought that Jingwan would be so ruthless. She did not give anyone time to react at all. For a moment, everyone was scared silly. Even a certain holy maiden who was still lying on Li Hongyuan's shoulder and blocking Jingwan's arm, widened her eyes. She did not even react to the change of the emotion-locking spell in her body. Jingwan did not stop at all. She pulled out the dagger and stabbed it into the back of the neck of the person under her elbow. Originally, this holy maiden was wearing clothes full of silver ornaments. Jingwan was determined to take her life. Her eyes were very accurate and her hand was very steady. Just from the side of her neck, the dagger, which could cut iron as if it was mud, directly cut off her aorta. Blood instantly gushed out like a fountain. The holy maiden tilted her head in disbelief and looked at Jingwan. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. Then she fell to the ground just like that. Her eyes were still fixed on Jingwan. Soon a large pool of blood flowed out from her body. However, although the blood of ordinary people had a fishy smell, her blood had a faint stench. Jingwan held the dagger. Blood dripped from the tip of the dagger. She lowered her eyes and looked at the holy maiden emotionlessly. Coveting my man is a crime worthy of death. Finally, the holy maiden breathed her last. But her eyes were still wide open. Obviously, she died with grievances. In the end, what she felt the most was unwillingness and disbelief. Her short life had been filled with extreme humiliation and ups and downs. She had always believed that she would be able to fight to the end, that she would be the final winner. However, she had been caught off guard and died. She had died. She died in the hands of the most unlikely person. Li Hongyuan sat still. Whether it was because of the death of the holy maiden, the male parasite had lost its effect, or because his feelings were recovering bit by bit in his heart. It was painful, very painful. It was not because of Jingwan's stab, but because he had hurt the person he loved the most. What had already happened, he did not want to pursue it. He reached out and held Jingwan's hand that was still on his shoulder. Jingwan did not resist. It was as if this was still the person closest to her. However, she just stood there. How abnormal was that? Others did not know, but Li Hongyuan felt it the clearest. He got up so quickly that he overturned the zither table in front of him. He turned around and held Jingwan's neck with one hand and her waist with the other. He kissed her fiercely. It was raging and crazy. His mouth kept calling out Wan Wan. Jingwan still did not respond. It was as if she had given her husband a blow. After killing her love rival, she also lost her vitality. Wan Wan, please. Wan, can you answer me? I beg you, please don't be like this. I can explain, really, I can explain. Otherwise, why don't you stab me again? Once is enough. I beg you, please don't let me lose it a second time, Wan. It was said that men did not cry easily. It was only because they had not been deeply hurt. Chapter 572. Who would have thought that things would turn out this way? Who would have the time to resent Li Hongyuan? He was still bleeding. He had seen with his own eyes that Jingwan had stabbed the dagger into his heart. Who knew how serious his injury was? They only thought that it was hard to tell because of the dark color of his clothes. But now he was hugging Jingwan and refusing to let go. He did not seem to care about his injury at all. If this went on, even if his injury was not serious, he might still lose his life. That was a situation no one wanted to see. Your Highness, please treat your injury first. One after another they tried to persuade him. However, Li Hongyuan only had eyes for Jingwan. It seemed that his life was not as important as Jingwan's forgiveness. Since they couldn't persuade Li Hongyuan, they could only start with Jingwan. At this time they were willing to believe that there was a reason behind it. Besides Li Hongyuan himself, Gongjio was the one who knew the most about the whole thing. Gongjio knelt on one knee. Your Highness, His Highness had no choice but to do this because of the special way to remove the emotion sealing spell. Please believe that His Highness only cares about you from the beginning to the end. Whether it is himself or external factors, he has never let you down. He didn't know if Jingwan really listened to his words or because she tasted Li Hongyuan's tears. but she finally reacted. Her empty eyes refocused, the dagger in her hand fell, and her body trembled involuntarily. Wan. His kiss became gentle and fell on her lips again and again. Treat your injury first. Jingwan's voice was a little hoarse and trembling. Wan, are you really so heartless that you won't forgive me? You're not even willing to hug me? If that's the case, I'd rather die in your hands. She knew that half of his words were true and the other half was a trick. She couldn't do anything to him. She compromised and followed his wishes. You win. Hurry up and treat your injury. Or do you really want to leave me alone in this world? Li Hongyuan, let me tell you, without you I can still live well. Jingwan hugged him tightly and listened to his heartbeat. But this time there was no sense of security. She only felt frightened, as if she could hear the sound of blood flowing. Jingwan hurriedly let go of him and tore off his clothes. Gongjiu, hurry up. Gongjiu got up and quickly applied acupuncture to stop Li Hongyuan's bleeding. He didn't have a medicine box with him, but he had the best medicine with him. It looked like he was prepared. Li Hongyuan had been holding Jingwan's hand all along, as if he was afraid that she would disappear if he let go. Even if he had sealed his feelings, this person was more important to him than his life. Jingwan looked at him blankly, but she didn't look at him. Instead, she looked at Gongjiu's movements. Was he already prepared to take the hit? Was that why he deliberately provoked her? The moment she saw Li Hongyuan, her whole person seemed to be divided. She was at two extremes. She was surprisingly calm but also completely lost her mind. Could even be said that she was crazy. Seemed like she was thinking too much, but it also seemed like she wasn't thinking at all. Her tolerance was much stronger than expected but also much weaker. Did she not trust him in her heart? No, she did. Even if seeing is believing, she still believed that what really provoked her was the coldness and ruthlessness in his eyes. There was no trace of her at all. That was why she didn't hesitate to stab him, and that was why she subconsciously deviated from her target. The reason why she made a move was never because she didn't trust him. Under normal circumstances, she probably wouldn't have been able to do it. Sure enough, she was too provoked. Stabbing him once was the same as stabbing him with her own life. Something really happened to him, she might not die with him because she still had a child. However, even if she was alive, she would just be a walking corpse. However, she still had to say that when this man really wanted to lie to her, she couldn't see through him. However, Jingwan didn't know that Li Hongyuan didn't want to lie to her. He was actually using the power of the emotion-sealing goo. He allowed that woman to use the female goo to affect him. In fact, it was a very dangerous thing. If he was careless, he might really have a change of heart. Li Hongyuan didn't seem to feel anything as he let Gongjiu do whatever he wanted to his body. His gaze was always on Jingwan. Looking at her expression, his heart ached. However, even if he had no choice, the damage was done. There would always be some scars left. Even if it couldn't be seen at all, it didn't mean that it didn't exist. Li Hongyuan reached out and gently stroked Jingwan's neck. Does it hurt here? Jingwan frowned slightly and was a little puzzled. It doesn't hurt. Why does it hurt? Wan Fengfei has the mother goo of the substitute goo in her body. You have the child goo in your body. The child takes the mother's place. You have to bear half of the pain caused by the external force on her body. Li Hongyuan explained, but he saw that Jingwan didn't seem to feel any pain. Was it because the mother goo died so there was no effect? However, when the mother goo died, the host of the child goo would not die but would weaken. In fact, Jingwan attacking him was more or less expected. But killing another person without mercy was really unexpected. Because she had always been soft-hearted and cherished human life. If he had a little foresight in advance, he would have stopped her. Jingwan forgot about the substitute goo. She didn't realize it when she killed the person. However, it doesn't hurt. It didn't hurt from the beginning to the end. Jingwan's gaze fell on the corpse on the ground. This was killed by her, but she didn't feel any psychological discomfort. The so-called substitute goo, could it be a lie? The purpose is just to restrain you from attacking her? It's not impossible. However, he still needed to confirm it. Although Li Hongyuan had already thought of ways to protect Jingwan's weak body, now there was another possibility. Naturally, he hoped that Jingwan was safe and healthy. However, Jingwan noticed another important point. You said she is Wan Fengfei? That's right. What his subordinates didn't know, he knew. It wasn't that he paid attention to Wan Fengfei, but it was a coincidence. Wan Fengfei had a special birthmark under her collarbone. In his previous life, when she threw herself into his arms, he had seen it. Because of its special shape, it left a little impression. And when she wore the barbarian tribe's clothing, the collar was much lower so he could see it. The impression in the depths of Li Hongyuan's memory was dug out again. Although he didn't remember it immediately, he felt it was familiar. He finally found the origin. Speaking of which, Li Hongyuan's memory was indeed quite good. Jingwan nodded faintly. It was Wan Fengfei. Then she had a clear conscience. She had long wanted to kill her. Once, after she understood some things, she felt a little regretful that she had died. She didn't expect that she was so lucky. After escaping from Prince Zhongqin's mansion, she never gave up and was always jumping around. Now that she killed her with her own hands, it was a bit like slapping an annoying bug to death instead of killing a person. This time it was impossible for her to jump around. It was too easy for her to die so simply. However, she was simply a cockroach. It was good for her to die so thoroughly. Li Hongyuan's wound was simply treated. Obviously this was far from enough. The group went back to the house where Li Hongyuan lived before, leaving Wan Fengfei's body there. Speaking of which, perhaps because she was too confident, Wan Fengfei didn't have her own people by her side. So until now those people hadn't found out that she was dead. However, this was also a matter of time. When the time came, it would be a fierce battle. When Gong Jiu further checked the specific condition of Li Hongyuan's injury and treated the wound, Jingwan was still a little absent-minded. What's wrong? Don't worry, it's all right. Li Hongyuan really didn't know how to talk to Jingwan now. He was a little helpless. It seemed that no matter what he said, it would be pale and powerless. Anything he said would be suspected of sophistry. He wanted to avoid it, but some things, if avoided, would only rot in the deep layer. Therefore, he could only try to ease it as much as possible, but it still seemed a little far-fetched. Jingwan looked at him. She didn't deny that she was worried. In fact, she was so worried that her heart almost stopped beating, but she didn't regret it. If I could do it again, I would still stab you. So Wan's heart is very soft to outsiders, but it's as hard as a stone to me. Li Hongyuan pretended to be wronged, but there was a smile in his eyes. It was enough to show that he didn't mind this matter. Well, if there's a next time, I will still do it. At that time you may not be so lucky. Jingwan stated a fact lightly. You made such a big move to give me time to block it. Sure enough, your heart is actually not hard enough. So, according to your reaction speed, you can completely block it. Why didn't you? He didn't even raise his hand. It's a gift from my wife. Naturally, no matter what it is, I have to accept it. Li Hongyuan smiled. Looking at Jingwan's pursed lips, he finally straightened his expression. Today, even if you don't do it, I will do it myself. So, what's the way to solve the love-sealing goo? Under normal circumstances, when the female goo dies, the connection between the pair of love-sealing goo will also be cut off. But Wan Fengfei has a substitute goo, so I can't kill her or even hurt her. I can only think of another way. Logically speaking, there's no other way to unlock the love-sealing goo poison. However, there's a special situation where the love-sealing goo poison can't bind both hosts together. The male love-sealing goo poison has someone else in his heart. Then the love-sealing goo poison can be unlocked by the love-sealing goo poison. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan. He wasn't sure if she could accept such an explanation. So, in essence, you want me to hate you? Is it that, in your opinion, the deeper the love, the deeper the hatred when betrayed? You also know that I won't rub sand in my eyes. Even if I know it's caused by external factors, I won't accept it? But Yuan, do you know that from the beginning to the end, I have never hated you? I love you with all my heart, and I can't take out the same heart to hate you. Moreover, I have always believed in you. Even if I don't have clear thoughts in my consciousness, this has never changed. Now tell me, did your method succeed, or did I kill Wan Fengfei to get rid of the love-sealing goo? Jingwan's expression was indifferent. At this time, there was finally a change in her expression. That dagger, it's not because you have a change of heart, but because you don't have me in your eyes. How can you not have me in your eyes? Her voice gradually rose, and at this time she was almost shouting. Don't talk about love-sealing. Even if you have forgotten everything, you can't not have me in your eyes. You can't. Seeing the hysterical Jingwan, Li Hongyuan felt very distressed, but he also felt very happy. What should he do? He was selfish. He had never thought of only giving without receiving anything in return. He had been waiting for Jingwan to return the same feelings as him. Today he obviously got it. He wanted to hug her and kiss her. In fact, he did do so. However, once again he deeply realized that Wang Fei had a special place in Wang Ye's heart. Therefore the most important master was still Wang Fei. In the future he should take it easy. Wang Fei might look gentle, but when she was angry or ruthless she would definitely kill people. The previous things seemed to have exhausted Jingwan's energy. At this moment she leaned in Li Hongyuan's arms and fell asleep. Sure enough, no matter what happened, this man's arms were the safest harbor for her. This had formed unconsciously. Before falling in love with him, she was rational and absolutely independent in her thoughts. She did not rely on others but became others' harbor invisibly. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan. He did not deliberately be careful, but he knew what kind of posture could make Jingwan sleep comfortably. However, when he was not facing Jingwan, now he was the real king of hell. Perhaps he was not as cold and terrifying as when he was locked in love, but his momentum was still breathtaking, making people breathless. After Gong Jiu confirmed that there was no goo in Jingwan's body, Li Hongyuan's heart returned to the original place. The thing he cared about most was solved. There was nothing else that could restrain him. Then there was no need to suppress his anger for scheming against Jingwan. The ice covering the volcano that was about to erupt had been broken. No matter who it was, they would have to pay for what they had done. As for how many innocent people would be involved during this period, it was not within his scope of consideration. As this period of time, Gong Jiu came into contact with and understood more and more goo. His memory of goo also increased day by day. It just inexplicably appeared out of nowhere. Until now, he might have become a person who understood goo, at least in theory. However, the origin of these memories was still unknown. Perhaps there would be an answer in the future, or perhaps there would never be an answer. However, after more understanding, Gong Jiu noticed that there were traces of goo in his body. Now that the goo worm had disappeared, if he guessed correctly, it should be the forgetting goo. Forgetting only things related to goo. Perhaps it was because of the disappearance of the goo worm that he inexplicably gained more memories. He was interested in goo worms. As for how he knew these things, he did not care. It did not matter whether he knew it or not. When he became a shadow guard, everything in the past, whether it was love or hate, had become a past tense. Because a shadow guard was only a subordinate of the master and had no ego. Being interested in goo did not mean that he wanted to raise it. Know thyself and know thy enemy to win 100 battles. He just did not want to suffer from goo poison in the future. However, when he first used the goo to remove the emotion-locking goo, his prediction was wrong. However, by a freak combination of factors, he still achieved his final goal. If he encountered it again in the future, he should be more cautious. Naturally, Wan Fengfei's body had already been discovered. It was later than expected, which showed how unpopular she was. However, her existence was special after all. It might be quiet in the thatched hut, but outside, it was already at daggers drawn. Li Hongyuan's order was only one word: kill. Jingwan had to take care of the fetus and Li Hongyuan had to recuperate. They both needed a quiet and stable environment. Therefore, even if he knew what was happening outside, Li Hongyuan did not let it affect the hut. Whether it was Gong Jiu or Mama Gong, they were all doing their own things. It seemed that what happened outside had nothing to do with them. As for Jingwan, she slept for almost a day and a night. After Gong Jiu repeatedly confirmed that she was just sleeping, Li Hongyuan was finally relieved. During this period he also took a few appropriate breaks, but each time was not considered long. Right now he still needed to take charge of the overall situation. After Jingwan woke up, she did not expect to sleep for so long. However, her spirit came back, especially after Li Hongyuan personally fed her enough food. She was a bit like when she was raised in the prince's mansion. After recovering, there were some things that she could face. Yuan, where did your emotion-locking goo come from? Was it also silently planted by someone? Jingwan did not believe this possibility. Because of the substitute goo, Wan Fengfei wanted to plant the emotion-locking goo in me while drawing a knife on herself. Therefore, Li Hongyuan did not hesitate to accept the substitute goo. Jingwan was speechless. Even if it was proven that he had been lied to at that time, even if he was 99% sure that it was true, he would not have hesitated because he cared too much about it. So he would rather believe it than not. If it did not involve her, how could such a simple and crude method work on him? It's just a bug. I never thought it had the ability to reach the heavens. The fact is you did fall for it. Jingwan ridiculed. Well, she actually did not believe in the ability of the bug. Wan, don't hit people in the face and don't expose people's shortcomings. Wan Fengfei should have been under control, but in the end she escaped. Jingwan continued to expose the shortcomings of the bug mercilessly. Li Hongyuan was helpless. His wife was obviously still angry. I suspected it and had people investigate it, but they didn't find anything, so I didn't care. After all, we were not in the capital when Prince Zhong's mansion caught fire. I underestimated some people and caused negligence. It won't happen again in the future. Sure enough, they should eliminate the root of the problem from the beginning, but you can't generalize everything. Everything depends on the situation. Regarding Wan Fengfei, she might have to bear a little responsibility. Chapter 573. What about Fu Rong and Sun Yilin? Have you dealt with them? Jingwan asked. Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan. His reaction was different from before. It was just mediocre. No, it's locked up. Locked up? I'm afraid it's not just locked up. Not dead, at least several layers of skin have been shed. There's something wrong with Sun Yilin and there's something wrong with Fu Rong. Isn't it obvious? Yuan, you know what I mean. Don't try to get away with it. Jingwan looked at him faintly. So rational, so calm. Li Hongyuan felt that he was a little suspicious of Jingwan, who always followed him and indulged him. However, his wife was so attractive now. He wanted to rub her into his bones and blood. I'll leave them to you to deal with, okay? Li Hongyuan compromised as if he was angry and kissed Jingwan hard on the mouth. Jingwan didn't react on the surface, but her heart was completely soft. She knew how possessive this man was, and she also knew that he was not so calm now. However, because it was her, he was willing to control himself. He could put away all negative emotions. His real thoughts might be that he couldn't wait to tear those two people, especially Sun Yilin, into pieces. Jingwan reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. She buried her face in his neck and didn't speak. At this time, silence was better than words. Li Hongyuan smiled silently, gentle but cruel. Jingwan walked out of the door and prepared to stretch her muscles and bones a little. Then she smelled something different in the air. Jingwan's sense of smell was much sharper than that of ordinary people. What's more, she was afraid that ordinary people could smell something different. When they entered this call yesterday, there were only a few of them. Now it seemed that only their own people were left. Although they had expected such a situation, were those people dead? Jingwan frowned slightly. That was a real enemy. There would be no mercy. Killed them all? Yes. Li Hongyuan replied, but he didn't hide it. So when will we leave? We've been out for a long time. Grandmother and the others should be worried. Maybe we'll have to wait. They couldn't leave now even if they wanted to. Are there a lot of enemies outside? Jingwan guessed. This place is near a mountain range on the western border of Qiyuan. Further west is a small country. When the previous dynasty ruled this territory, the country of Zhang was still the territory of the previous dynasty. When the great ancestor rose up in the flames of war, a local official took advantage of the situation and ceded the land to become the king, establishing the country of Zhang. When Qiyuan was just established, the country was not stable and the mountain range on the side was a natural barrier. Zhang was easy to defend and difficult to attack, so Qiyuan allowed the existence of Zhang. Later, Zhang voluntarily submitted to Qiyuan and paid tribute, so for 100 years there was peace. But now things have changed. Li Hongyuan gave the answer in another way. Zhang betrayed Qiyuan and sided with the southern Qi kingdom? That's right. Although there's a mountain range on the side, a road was opened up in the early years. It's connected to Qiyuan and formed an official road. Every year Zhang country pays tribute and uses this road. It's difficult for a large army to travel, but if it's only a few hundred people, it's not a problem at all. Our current position is only a few dozen li away from that official road. It was not a military fortress, so the number of people guarding it was quite limited. Moreover, it was the border between two countries. Naturally, there was a certain amount of trade. There were always a few people coming and going. Otherwise, they could change the route in advance. It was not difficult to cross the mountains with light luggage. Jingwan knew it. They couldn't have chosen such a place for no reason. Wanwan, there may be some obstacles later. It's probably not just weapons. Don't be afraid. We will definitely return to the capital safely. Jingwan chuckled. Why should I be afraid? Don't worry. Even if I'm a burden, I'll do it with a clear conscience. I'll stay where it's the safest. I won't run around and I won't try to be brave. That's how it should be. Li Hongyuan kissed her. Moreover, you're not a burden. You're a treasure worth protecting with everything. She didn't know if it was worth it to protect her with everything he had, but she knew that he would do it. In addition, even if he didn't show it, she could feel it. It seemed that because of what happened before, someone seemed to be insecure. She could guarantee that even when she was asleep, he didn't leave her side for half a step. When he was asleep, he hugged her, and when he was awake, he looked at her. In this relationship, he was actually the passive one. As strong as he was, there were times when he was worried about gains and losses. Jingwan touched the corner of his lips. Yuan, you can do whatever you want. Really, you don't have to endure so hard. In the past, she had told him that if it wasn't necessary, he should try his best not to kill. But now she didn't want to say this anymore. He should live freely and do whatever he wanted. There was no need to wrong himself. They had come to this point today. What else could they not accept from each other? No matter what kind of person he was, even if he was really sick or really perverted, she would accept it all. No matter what kind of karma he had, she would accompany him. When Li Hongyuan heard this, a fierce light flashed in his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. It was really undisguised wickedness. He held Jingwan's hand and kissed her fingertips. He didn't say anything, but it was enough to show his happy mood. As for what to do next, it was another story. When Jingwan saw this, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Someone is going to be unlucky. However, the thought only flashed through her mind, leaving no trace behind. No matter who that unlucky person was, whether they were dead or alive, they could no longer arouse her emotions. Jingwan still lived her life. Gong Jiu had prescribed her miscarriage prevention medicine. Although the conditions were limited now, this was after all a backer. Even if there was no ready-made medicine, she could still think of a way. Every time before and after the medicine, she would take her pulse. Other people took her pulse once every 3 days. Now she took her pulse 3 times a day, far more than that. Li Hongyuan also changed his medicine frequently. This kind of medicine was ready-made. When they left White Dragon Temple, after all, the road ahead was very dangerous. The most probably was the medicine. In addition, Gong Jiu also gave him acupuncture to accelerate the healing of the wound. In the current situation, a healthy body was far better than an injured body. After all, his martial strength was there. If he couldn't move because of his injury, he would waste more than just a portion of his combat strength. However, he was injured. It was not something that could be healed in a day. Did Jingwan regret her stab? She still didn't. She would feel heartache, she would worry, but she did not regret it. Li Hongyuan did not hide the situation outside from her. When the people below reported to him, she listened at the side. The situation was more serious than expected. Thinking about it, since Prince Jin of Qiyuan knew that Zhongguo was colluding with Southern Qi, then for his own safety, it was imperative to get rid of Li Hongyuan. After all, no matter what ambitions or plans Southern Qi had for Qiyuan, before they succeeded, it was all empty talk. And no matter how bad Qiyuan was, if they were determined to deal with the traitor Zhongguo would not have the slightest ability to resist. Therefore, before Southern Qi realized its annexation of Qiyuan, at least the large territory bordering Zhongguo and Southern Qi would become Southern Qi's possession. Zhongguo would not publicly acknowledge Southern Qi as a vassal. Meeting behind the scenes was one thing, but betraying on the surface was another. Dealing with Li Hongyuan had originally been Southern Qi's plan. The saint of the barbarians, Ruan Fengfei, was the main executor. In the middle of this, there were many people who cooperated with her. In short, because they knew that Prince Jin of Qiyuan was not a small matter, controlling such a person was far more valuable than directly killing him. The chances of success were very high. Some people in Southern Qi, because they understood the emotion-sealing curse, believed that after planting it in Li Hongyuan, they already had the overall situation under control. So she borrowed force, and the target of this force was of course Jin Qinhuang. Therefore she meekly accepted the task given to her by those people and put a gu on Jingwan. In essence, it was not to hurt Jingwan but to anger Li Hongyuan. She believed that Li Hongyuan would eventually find out about the former way. At that time the former way would more or less pay the price. The price paid by a country, no matter how small, was far more than her own hatred. Although she still couldn't find the real culprit, at least she could be a little comforted. Not to mention Jingwon, even when Li Hongyuan looked at Fu Rong, there was a slight change in his eyes. He really didn't see that Fu Rong had such a temperament. The firmness in her heart had never been smoothed out. Even if she accepted her fate, she didn't accept it. She looked docile and harmless, but once the bottom line of her tolerance was exceeded, then she would secretly show her claws and use her intelligence to plot little by little. In fact, until now, Fu Rong wanted to borrow Li Hongyuan's power to deal with the former Wei. Although, even if she didn't do anything, Li Hongyuan still wouldn't let the former Wei go. However, whether she did or not, the nature was different. What's more, she accurately and ruthlessly stepped on Li Hongyuan's weak spot. Li Hongyuan chuckled. Women like Fu Rong existed in large numbers. He never put them in his eyes, but now he was ruthlessly used. This experience was quite fresh. Jingwon glanced at him. She could feel the danger in his eyes. No matter how he acted in front of her, he had absolute pride. In his eyes, Fu Rong was like an ant. It would be strange if he was happy to be played by an ant. But now this was not the main point. Fu Rong, what's the matter with the sleeping insect and the substitute insect? In response to Wang Fei, this matter begins with the true identity of this servant's mother. They all believe that this servant's mother is an ordinary woman. This is true but not completely true. This servant's mother is actually from Nanqi, a barbarian tribe. Speaking of this, Jingwon didn't know what expression to show. When I was young, father wasn't around all year round. Mother was with me almost every day. At that time she told me a lot of things over and over again. Perhaps I didn't understand, but it would be hard for me to not remember after hearing it over and over again. As for her past, she didn't say much. I vaguely remember that she was the daughter of the leader of the barbarian tribe. In addition, she was very talented in raising insects. She was secretly chosen to be the saintess. However, I don't know what happened later. She left her home and was in the situation of the former Wei, where her life and death were controlled. She didn't raise any more insects. I don't know if it was because she couldn't raise any more, or if there was some other reason she didn't raise any more insects until her death. As for the insects of the barbarian tribe, she told me everything. However, she only told me the signs of being infected and the method to cure it. As for how to raise the insects, she didn't say a word. When she was dying, she gave me a bead. A bead that can cure hundreds of poisons and eliminate hundreds of insects. It is said that it is a sacred object that has been passed down for thousands of years in the barbarian tribe. Because of it, the sleeping insect and the substitute insect in your body were eliminated. It was also because of it that I was able to get the medicine from the Gong family's hospital when I was in the mansion. Hand over the bead and I can spare your life. Fu Rong was silent. She lowered her eyes and glanced at the Buddha bead on Jingwon's wrist. Li Hongyuan sneered, "You don't want to hand it over? When you die, I can always find it and take it away." Wait, Jingwon held Li Hongyuan's hand. She remembered that Fu Rong had said something profound to her before. Now she thought about it. Fu Rong, is that bead with me? Since you cured me of the insect, you haven't taken it back, right? I can't repay your kindness. It's useless for a person like me to take it. Fu Rong admitted in a disguised way. But where did you put it? I don't even have a purse on me now. It's been so long. It's impossible for her not to notice that there is one more thing on her body. Because of doubts, she slightly lowered her head. Then her eyes suddenly fixed on the Buddha bead. This is the only bead on her body. The question is it possible? Jingwon reached out her hand and fiddled with the beads one by one. That bead is quite strange. It can change its appearance within a certain range. As long as the size is about the same, it will change into the appearance of the nearest bead. Did that mean that there was an alien in her Buddhist prayer beads from the beginning? Jingwon's expression was a bit stiff. The insect can go against the heaven and the bead has become a spirit? The effect of the insect can barely be regarded as something in the insect's body that targets human nerves, hormones or other things. But this bead, is it possible that there is something in the body of the chameleon in it? But the chameleon is alive. Even if the existence of the chameleon itself is unscientific, Jingwon still needs some time to accept it when she encounters something unscientific. Li Hongyuan held Jingwon's wrist. His acceptance was much higher than Jingwon's. Such a good thing, he will try his best to get it for Jingwon. Now that it is with Jingwan, he will not be polite. However, it is for Jingwan to use, so naturally it must be absolutely safe. Therefore, Li Hongyuan directly took off the Buddha bead and handed it to Gong Jiu. Without Li Hongyuan's explanation, Gong Jiu also knew his intention. There are many poisons in Gong Jiu's body, and in the house where Wan Fengfei lived before, there are many poisonous insects. It is very easy to verify its function. As for its safety, in fact, during this period Jingwan has been carrying it with her all the time. There is no abnormality in her body, which is already very good proof. If it is harmful, even if it is very small after such a long time, there will be more or less signs. And if it takes a few years for the harm to appear, then even Li Hongyuan will probably not wait so long. No matter how suspicious he is, he will not go to this extent. If she doesn't wear it, it may lead to the treasure being covered in dust. The result of the verification was quite obvious. When those poisonous insects touched the Buddha bead, they turned into smoke in an instant and disappeared without a trace. And when the rabbit carried the Buddha bead, Gong Jiu sprinkled all kinds of poisons on it or directly poured it down its mouth. It was more than enough to poison hundreds of people to death, but the rabbit was still alive and kicking. Hearing it was naturally not as shocking as seeing it. This bead is really a good thing. Do you know the range of effect of this bead? Li Hongyuan asked Fu Rong. Wang Ye, forgive me, this slave doesn't know. She had obtained something from her mother, but she had never had the chance to verify it. Perhaps she had, such as poison or something. After all, she had probably gotten in the way of the other sisters. However, she had been unknowingly dealt with, so she naturally had no way of knowing. Wang Ye, this subordinate knows something at this moment. Gong Jiu said. Li Hongyuan was already used to the memories that popped up from time to time in the past few days. The sacred object of the barbarian tribe does have such a function. For the poisonous insects, direct contact is what you saw just now. If you don't touch it, it will take some time, at most 3 days. Wearing the sacred object, it is basically impossible for the poisonous insects to get close to the body. If there is an accident, it will not affect the host. Like any poison, the maximum range of effect is 10 feet. Chapter 574. No matter why the barbarians worshipped their most precious treasure as a sacred object, it had nothing to do with Jingwan. Li Hongyuan also understood some problems, so he put the beads back on Jingwan's wrist without hesitation. Li Hongyuan could take all the good things in the world for himself, but Jingwan couldn't. Although she didn't deny that she wanted this thing very much, if she had it from the beginning, then there wouldn't be a series of things later. However, there was a contradiction in itself. If Fu Rong gave it to Jingwan early, Fu Rong wouldn't have the capital to take revenge. The premise of Fu Rong's betrayal was that she could ensure Jingwan's safety. After achieving her goal, she did not hesitate to give the treasure to Jingwan. She might have thought about it in the past, but at that time Jingwan was protected by Li Hongyuan so tightly that not even a drop of water could leak out. The barbarian tribe's holy relic seemed to be just icing on the cake. Now that Fu Rong had given the treasure to Jingwan for no reason, she, who was already not very trustworthy, was afraid that it would only lead to more suspicion. Therefore, even if she wanted to give the treasure, she needed to look at the right time. As for Li Hongyuan, to be honest, his weight in Fu Rong's heart was really low. His identity as a prince may not be comparable to the identity of Jingwan's husband. What Fu Rong praised most about him was his deep love for Jingwan. Because he didn't have any weight, Fu Rong didn't hesitate to use him. Jingwan fiddled with the beads, but she didn't take them off in the end. First, her husband would definitely not allow it. Second, she wanted it anyway, so there was no need to pretend. The problem now was how to deal with Fu Rong. She took her things and she didn't betray her. According to reason, the previous things should be written off. However, she was indeed poisoned by the sleeping insect, and then her husband was taken out of the capital and fell into a series of dangerous situations. Fu Rong's actions were the cause of everything. In the big picture, it was not excessive to punish her. It was not something that could be offset by a bead. She wanted to punish her a little, but her husband wouldn't let her go easily after knowing that he was tricked. Some people's dignity was often more unforgivable than a true betrayal or a true crime. Seeing that you are sensible, I can spare you from death, but you can't escape punishment. Ah Yuan, let Fu Rong make up for her mistakes. You said to let me deal with it. Jingwan said. Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan. Jingwan's eyes were very firm. Obviously, she already had a plan in her heart. Li Hongyuan snorted softly, which meant that he acquiesced. Fu Rong, the person who contacted you in the White Dragon Temple was Sun Yilin, and the people who traveled with you along the way. Except for the few of them, the others were probably all dead. We want to let them believe that you are still not exposed, and then we will send some news to them. What do you think? However, there is a lot of danger in this matter, so you can refuse. There was not only one way to atone for her mistakes. Fu Rong was very smart. Fu Rong was a very smart person. Not only was she a fast learner, in fact, if she was given enough conditions, she would not be worse than several women in the palace. Moreover, she had advantages in some aspects. For example, after living in a brothel for many years, it was easy for her to please someone, especially men. For example, she had a lot of ups and downs in her life, so she did not care much about her life. Moreover, even though she had experienced so much, her heart was not corrupted. She still had humanity and knew how to be grateful. For the current Minister of Rights, Su Darren, who was a black-hearted person, in fact he would not like people like him, because he knew best that people like him would do anything to achieve their goals. There were some things that they could do themselves, but the people below them absolutely could not do that. Therefore, if all kinds of advantages were used properly, they might play an unexpected role. Fu Rong listened quietly and her eyes flashed slightly. Wang Fei, this servant is willing. If possible, this servant also wants to take revenge on her own. She put a gu in Jingwan and used Li Hongyuan. Her purpose was not simple. Because of the unwillingness and resentment in her heart, she used the strength of others to achieve her goal. How could it be better than doing it herself and participating in it personally? It had to be said that Fu Rong was really unexpected again and again. The things hidden in her bones were too different on the surface. However, in the end, the culprit who made her what she was today was the royal family of the former way. Using a weak woman's body to compete with them was undoubtedly like an ant trying to shake a tree. Fu Rong, have you thought about it? This is not a joking matter. Your Highness, I originally thought that everything that happened in the past was due to my bad luck. But since I was able to meet Your Highness, it meant that I wasn't completely bad. If I could serve Your Highness for the rest of my life, it would be an excellent thing. However, someone came out and told me that everything was man-made and wanted me to serve Your Highness for the rest of my life. It's just that my bones haven't completely softened yet, so I have to repay you for the rest of my life. It would be good if I could repay you with 20 or 30%. It would be even better if I could repay you with 50 or 60%. How could this be called bones are not completely soft? She was made of iron. Her appearance looked soft and easy to pinch, but if you really took a bite you might break a mouthful of teeth. Such a talent, if she was placed by her side as a servant, it would definitely be wasted. However, thinking about the spies sent by other countries to Qiyuan, the top spies were all women, but they could not be clean and innocent. Whether they were really dissolute or forced, in short, they did not have a good ending in the end. Jingwan did not want Fu Rong to go to this step. Moreover, she did not have any training. Wan, don't worry. I also have people in the former way. When the time comes, I will send people to help her. Of course, the so-called help is also surveillance. In Li Hongyuan's eyes, there is a stain on her that cannot be easily washed away. Besides, there is still a lot of things waiting for us to deal with in the Qiyuan. It will take a lot of time to arrange for her to go to the former way. During this time she can learn some things, but she does not need to learn too much. Specially trained spies and ordinary spies have their own uses. The former may not be better than the latter. Many times it depends on how they are used. Li Hongyuan looked at Fu Rong's face. When Imperial Consort Su wanted her to be Li Hongyuan's concubine, she resolutely disfigured her face. Anyway, it is already disfigured. She will be infected with a goo and become even uglier. At that time, probably no man will want to covet her. Li Hongyuan did not even need to guess. He knew that his wife was most worried about the last thing. Jingwan was silent. If there was a so-called beauty goo, there would naturally be an ugly goo. Speaking of which, the former was made up of young and beautiful women, but the latter was far less exaggerated. Jingwan suspected that Sun Yilin had a similar goo. It seemed that it was not as simple as making people ugly. Moreover, no matter what kind of goo it was, Jingwan was against it from the bottom of her heart. However, when some things were not used on one's own people, one had to admit that they were actually very useful and effective. Compared with her disgust, as expected, her husband could get things done more easily. That was why she had the upper hand. People were indeed selfish. Even if they were selfless, it was only relative. The only person who was truly selfless at any time and in any position was probably the sage. As for where those goo came from, if they knew where they came from, would they be afraid of not being able to get them? Moreover, Gong Jio's current state was quite strange. Perhaps at some time all the methods of raising goo would appear in his mind. Regardless of whether he wanted to raise them or not, as long as Li Hongyuan said a word, he would definitely do his best. Let's see how Fu Rong chooses. Jingwan said. She even specially looked at a certain someone. Was there a need to speak so harshly? For most women, chastity was important, but appearance was also important. It may be easier to rely on beauty to gain a foothold, but at the same time, it is also fragile. From other aspects, things may be more difficult, but once you succeed, your foothold will be more stable. All the things she needed to wash up were prepared. When she was completely dressed, Jingwan was completely awake. At this moment, her clothes were very simple and neutral. There were no ornaments on her head or body. The only ornament was probably the Buddha beads on her wrist. However, in the end, Jingwan still asked Gong Mama to tie the dagger to her arm. Although the sleeves were much narrower, it was still easy to roll up the sleeves. With me here, what does Wan need it for? Li Hongyuan was a little dissatisfied. He was injured, so he wouldn't use force easily. Moreover, he didn't feel at ease leaving Jingwan to others. Therefore, his most important task in the future was to protect his wife. I believe in you. This is just in case. Jingwan was worried about him. Sometimes, even if she knew that her ability was limited and she might even be more of a hindrance, she still wanted to protect her lover. Of course, Jingwan had learned self-defense in her previous life. When she went to the northwest, she learned it from Gong Mama. Because she had a good foundation, she was not as good as a well-trained person. Therefore, she definitely wouldn't be a hindrance. Li Hongyuan frowned, but he didn't say anything in the end. When everything was ready, Jingwan stood up and moved a little. When she lowered her head, she silently found that her belly seemed to be a lot bigger. She didn't know if it was because the clothes were more close-fitting, or because she didn't pay attention to her belly for a period of time. After careful calculation, it had been more than 5 months since she was pregnant on June 11th. She would be born in more than 4 months. Jingwan slowly exhaled, looked back at Li Hongyuan and said with a smile, "Let's go." Li Hongyuan touched her face and leaned over to kiss her lips. Anyway, these 2 days he kissed Jingwan without any scruples. Jingwan was used to it and the people around her were also used to it. When they saw it, they just tilted their heads. Even the most innocent black girl didn't blush. There were not many torches outside, but they weren't few either. Basically, they were controlled to the extent that the enemy couldn't see clearly, and it wouldn't affect their progress. Jingwan saw Sun Yilin at a glance. Compared with the other people who were almost integrated into one, he was a little unique. He seemed to be in poor spirits, much worse than Fu Rong. It was enough to show that someone really took special care of him. However, compared with the way on the way here, the treacherous aura on Sun Yilin's body was much weaker. Even if his face was still ugly, she didn't feel uncomfortable. Sun Yilin's abnormality could only be explored later. Although it was unforgivable, for the sake of Sun Yijia, Jingwan was still willing to find reasons and excuses for him. Sun Yilin's current position was hostile to Jingwan, so there was still a person who was watching him. However, this person couldn't be expected to do much. If necessary, he might directly kill Sun Yilin. After all, he was an enemy. If he couldn't take him away, he would kill him. Was it possible to let him go back? What a simple logic. Li Hongyuan was protecting Jingwan and there were a few other people around them. There weren't many people and it was similar to the formation on the side. If they were too tightly protected, it would only make them more conspicuous. At that time, they would become targets. In addition, Blackie and Fu Rong were walking together and there were also people around them. In a sense, they were also Jingwan's substitutes. Jingwan was walking silently and attentively. The noise outside the valley gradually entered her ears. In fact, there were a lot of people, but it was still much weaker than the shouting on the battlefield. At some point, her footsteps quickened and she was about to jog. And it seemed that because of the appearance of these people, the noise suddenly doubled, and she could even feel the pressure of the crowd suddenly surging up. When she was in the northwest, Jingwan was the closest and she was also at the rear of the battlefield, so she didn't see the scene with her own eyes. Perhaps it wasn't as grand as that time, but the difference wasn't too far. Especially when she was close, she could hear the sound of a sharp blade piercing flesh and blood, and there was also an unusually obvious smell of blood, which made her faintly nauseous. Jingwan wasn't sure if she could bear it, so she kept her head down and followed Li Hongyuan closely. In fact, as a special personnel who needed to be protected, looking around was a big taboo. Jingwan wouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Li Hongyuan didn't stop walking and his direction was very clear. And from the beginning to the end, Jingwan didn't hear any voices nearby. Obviously, he and his subordinates had a way of communicating without words. Zhang Guo was determined to take Li Hongyuan's life, and all directions outside the call must have been blocked. However, because of the terrain and the arrangement of the other party's personnel, there were always relatively weak points. Li Hongyuan's subordinates must have figured these out clearly. Without communication, how could they be unwavering? Jingwan felt the stickiness under her feet. In the absence of rain and snow, it was obvious that it was soaked in blood. The light of the torch was limited. At some point, Jingwan stepped down and stepped on a soft but hard object and she stumbled slightly. Jingwan's first reaction was that it was an arm. She had clearly killed someone before, and whether it was physical or psychological, she didn't have any reaction, but now, sure enough, whether it was killing someone or dying someone, she had to choose her target. Li Hongyuan hurriedly supported Jingwan. Wan, I'm fine. She suppressed the discomfort in her heart. Li Hongyuan frowned in the darkness, but without another word he carried Jingwan in his arms. Caught off guard, Jingwan's body leaned back a little, but her mouth was tightly shut. She wrapped her arms around his neck to prevent the nearest enemy from hearing. She lowered her voice and said, "Yuan, put me down. This is too eye-catching." It might not be easy to see clearly if they were walking by themselves with the torch swaying. But if they were carrying someone, as long as the torch swayed slightly and someone saw them and shouted, they would be exposed. Wan, don't worry. Your husband will definitely bring you back safely." Li Hongyuan subconsciously kissed the corner of her eye again. In this wilderness, the road was rugged and uneven. For the average person, even in the daytime, it wouldn't be smooth to walk, let alone when they couldn't see clearly. If she followed them, it would indeed slow down the speed. Jingwan pursed her lips, hugged her hands tighter and no longer spoke. In this way, she didn't have to concentrate on walking. She could see the situation nearby. The weapons on the periphery were clashing and the middle was ready to strike at any time. Upon closer inspection, she found that they seemed to be blocking her figure, and the torch could only illuminate a small area. In this way, her worries seemed to be superfluous. Compared to the people of Zhang who were shouting to kill, the people surrounding the husband and wife were very quiet. "Jin Qin Wang Fei is over here." It was unknown who shouted. But this direction was obviously a bit different from Jingwan's direction. The enemies in front were reduced by half in an instant. The pressure suddenly decreased and the speed of the breakthrough was obviously faster. Because Jin Qin Wang didn't want his Wang Fei to be hurt, even if it was only a possibility, he would rather be controlled by others. This showed how important his Wang Fei was to him. In this case, even if the two separated and Jin Qin Wang Fei was in danger, it was impossible for Jin Qin Wang to be indifferent. And Zhang Guo's plan was to keep an eye on the husband and wife while they were breaking out. It would be best if they could directly find Li Hongyuan. It should be known that before this, the people of Zhang who were responsible for intercepting and killing Li Hongyuan had set a high reward. They took Li Hongyuan's head, high official, generous salary and beautiful women. Not a single thing would be lacking. For ordinary soldiers, this was a temptation. Just by killing one person, they could reach the sky in a single bound. Compared to struggling in other places for a lifetime and still being at the bottom, there was basically no need to think about what to choose. Therefore, the attraction of this sentence was absolutely strong. The people who were attracted didn't even hesitate. Jingwan's heart couldn't help but rise. She turned her head to look in the direction of the voice. Under the dim light of the fire, she could only see the crowd moving. More and more people were rushing over and they were still fighting. It was enough to see that there were people of Zhang and also people of her own side. This time, the one who used her identity to lead the enemies away was either Fu Rong or He Mei, and the two were together. The two might have the intention to be her substitute, but there was no deliberate arrangement. Jingwan didn't know if they were accidentally discovered or deliberately. Her fists clenched tighter and tighter. If she could, she didn't want anything to happen to them. She hoped that all of them would be fine. But in this kind of situation, how could they not be injured or dead? Jingwan gritted her teeth. Her breathing became a little heavy, but she still didn't speak. She knew very well that only when the couple went out they had a higher chance of surviving. If they were left behind, it meant that everyone would die here. Everyone around her was fighting for her, giving their all for her, and even dying for her. That kind of feeling was definitely not a good feeling. As long as one was not absolutely selfish and ruthless, it would be impossible for them to remain indifferent, let alone Jingwan. That kind of impact was definitely unprecedented. Li Hongyuan could understand Jingwan's current feelings. After all, he had tasted that kind of feeling in his previous life. Later, his heart became colder and colder. Although it wasn't completely indifferent, it was no longer enough to move him, let alone make him do something irrational. Chapter 575. Surprisingly calm, the speed of their feet became faster and faster, and the people around them were the same. When they almost completely broke out of the encirclement, the other side seemed to have discovered the truth. Jingwan heard some buzzing sounds, but she still heard someone roaring angrily. That person was probably the person in charge of Zhang country. Trash, hurry up and chase after them. It was obvious that since the other side was fake, the real one must have taken advantage of this time to rush out. Judging from the swaying torches everywhere, there was more than one group of people who broke out. Who knew which direction Qiyuan's Prince Jean was in? He spat and cursed. You let him run away like this? He was very clear that if he couldn't kill Qiyuan's Prince Jean when he returned, his head would be moved. Trash, hurry up and chase after them. He kicked the person closest to him. He was angry not only because the other person ran away so easily, but also because he was so easily fooled and angry. He obviously knew that it could be a scam. No, how could he be fooled? It was obviously his group of subordinates who were eager for quick success and kept dispatching people. Li Hongyuan ordered some people to stay behind to stop the attack, and the rest to continue forward. The torches in their hands were directly extinguished. Without torches, the following path was naturally more difficult to walk. However, as long as it was not pitch black, after their eyes adjusted a little, they could basically see the vague outlines of nearby objects. Then Jingwan realized that their speed did not slow down by much. As they walked further and further, the sound behind them became weaker and weaker until they could not hear it at all. It was quiet. In the winter there were very few insect sounds. Suddenly, a ball of fire exploded in the sky. With the previous battlefield as the center, there was about a 90-degree angle with the direction they were at. Although she had never seen it before, Jingwan knew that it should be a signal flare. Gunpowder had long appeared in the history of Qiyuan, and firecrackers had already been used. It was not surprising that there would be a signal flare. Jingwan watched it disappear completely and did not retract her gaze. Wan, don't worry. Our people are already trying their best to break out of the encirclement. Li Hongyuan said softly. Jingwan responded softly, her nasal voice was a little heavy. They were basically shadow guards, and their lethality was originally very high. Although there were many enemies, if they wanted to, they could always kill their way out. Previously, they had been fighting with the people of Zhang because their master had not left. Now that their master was safe, and Zhang had sent a large number of people to chase after Li Hongyuan, as long as they were still alive, it would not be difficult to escape. But they were not sure how many people would be left. Don't worry, Princess Consort. They're all elites under His Highness. It's not a problem for them to fight against 10 people. Gong Mama also spoke out to comfort her. Jingwan responded with a smile. However, that smile was extremely forced. The so-called 1 against 10 was probably under the situation of being defeated one by one. If they were besieged, how many people could do this? That was because they had a mortal body. They only had a pair of hands and 2 legs. They could block 1 or 2 sides, but how could they block 3 or 4 sides at the same time? Moreover, the Shadow Guard's attack power was indeed high, but they mostly walked the path of craftiness and focused on individual combat. Their battlefield had never been in such a situation. Jingwan was not stupid. Even if she had never encountered Shadow Guards, there were similar occupations in her previous life. She could always find out from some channels that she could use. As the saying goes, different roads lead to the same destination. In fact, there was no other way to mobilize so many shadow guards. There were not many guards in the Wang residence. Although Li Hongyuan also had the ability to mobilize troops, those people were not involved in the things he had done before. To mobilize them, at least official channels were needed. Li Hongyuan was trapped. Although he could still barely communicate with the outside world, the people outside did not know his specific location. In this situation, he could only rely on shadow guards. Jingwan leaned on Li Hongyuan's shoulder. They did not want her to know, so she would just pretend that she did not know. However, Li Hongyuan and Jingwan's minds were connected and they could not understand each other better. Their bodies also had the most direct contact, so how could they not feel it? They were shadow guards. It was their honor to die for their master. Li Hongyuan could not say such words to Jingwan. Rest for a while. Gongjiu, take my pulse. Li Hongyuan opened his mouth and said. Jingwan heard this and did not care about anything else. Yuan, did the wound split open? She asked anxiously as her hands gently touched the wound. Don't worry, it shouldn't split open. It just hurts a little. Li Hongyuan comforted her gently. It was so dark that she couldn't see anything. Jingwan could only quietly lean against a tree and watch the blurry figure moving. Gongjiu had practiced the skill of treating wounds in the dark. Just by feeling, he knew that Li Hongyuan's wound had split open a little and was bleeding a little. However, if it was any other time, he would not even frown, let alone cry out in pain. He would not reapply medicine until the matter was over. Not only Gongjiu knew, but the people around also knew that he did this to divert the princess's attention. In fact, it was very successful. If it was any other time, they would probably think that he was treacherous. He actually shamelessly used the trick of injuring himself to gain the princess's sympathy. However, it was special now. No one thought that he was wrong. They had more or less experienced their companions dying for one reason or another. It was only because of external reasons that their 7 emotions and 6 desires were weak. It wasn't that they didn't have any. When they faced it for the first time, especially when their companions died for them, that kind of feeling was really so painful that they wanted to die. The princess had not seen most of the shadow guards, but she had always cherished her life. So many people died and it seemed to her that it was because of her. How could she feel good? It was best to divert her attention. Although she was still worried about the prince, she knew that the prince's life was not in danger. Naturally, her emotions would not be so heavy. She groped around and finished treating Li Hongyuan's wound. Your Highness, don't worry. The wound is bleeding very little. It won't have a big impact. It's good. Jingwan breathed a sigh of relief. Speaking of which, she was also worried that she did not notice Li Hongyuan's scheming. Since he said that he wanted to rest, he would definitely rest. However, the conditions did not allow it. Li Hongyuan was not so particular. Li Hongyuan casually leaned against a tree and sat down. He pulled Jingwan into his arms and whispered to her. In short, he wanted to divert her attention. He basically knew what the situation of this battle was. Originally, he chose to break out in the second half of the night when people were most tired. In this way, it was not far from dawn now. Jingwan did not even walk a few steps. She was not tired, but her mind was tense. Moreover, pregnant women were easy to be tired. Li Hongyuan kept talking to her, which imperceptibly soothed her nerves. When she relaxed, she was a little sleepy. However, she was worried, so she could not sleep well. If she could sleep well, she would definitely recover a lot when she woke up. Li Hongyuan exhausted his patience and coaxed Jingwan to sleep in the end. By the time his voice had completely disappeared, the surroundings had quieted down once more. Li Hongyuan turned his head and stroked Jingwan's hair from time to time. No one knew what he was doing. Obviously, he did not intend to get up and leave. Although this place was not far from the call, he was not worried because of that. Some of the people who followed them were also closing their eyes to rest, and some were scattered around to keep watch. Granny Gong untied the bag tied on her back. There was only a cloak in it. Originally, it was a burden during the breakout, but Granny Gong insisted on carrying it in case of an emergency. Obviously, it came in handy. She took it out and put it on Jingwan. After this rest, when they got up again, the sky was already slightly bright. After confirming the direction, they continued on their way without waking up Jingwan. When Jingwan woke up naturally, the sky was already bright. She hurriedly asked Li Hongyuan to put her down. She did not know how long they had been walking, but no matter how good her husband's physical strength and arm strength were, he was still injured. Moreover, no matter how capable he was not a machine. After a long time, lighter things would become heavier, and Jingwan's weight was not light. Coincidentally, there was a small stream in front of them. They also needed to eat something to maintain their strength. After all, it was not completely safe now. For the shadow guards, there was no need to worry about food in the wilderness. Even if it was winter, they would quickly bring back something that could be eaten out of the forest. The only problem was probably the taste. They were used to it. It was fine as long as there was something to eat. However, when the food was about to be handed to the two masters, they realized belatedly that it was very embarrassing. Li Hongyuan looked at it with disdain. Jingwan accepted it in a good mood and even glared at a certain someone. After putting it in her mouth, it did not seem that bad. The specific location could not be confirmed, but it was generally clear. The people of Zhang did not want Li Hongyuan to return to the capital of Qiyuan. For this reason, they did not hesitate to cut off the path where the garrison was, followed by the official road and then the nearest village. In this way, their manpower would definitely be scattered. However, as long as they blocked the nearest path, there would still be a considerable number of people on each path. At least it was far more than Jingwan's current manpower. Moreover, it was easier to be discovered in broad daylight. Therefore, the safer way was to bypass these places. In this way, they would have to cross the mountains and ridges on foot. This was not an easy task. If Jingwan was not pregnant, this trip could be regarded as a hiking trip. Anyway, Jingwan's physical strength was very good, so it was not a problem at all. Therefore, after thinking about it, Li Hongyuan decided to stay in place and move around. If they were careful, they would not be in danger of being exposed. Of course, unless they were extremely unlucky. If they did not see them for a long time, Li Hongyuan's people would eventually find them. At that time, his side would have the advantage. In the territory of Qiyuan, no matter how arrogant the people of Zhang were, there must be a limit. If they dragged on for a long time, they would only be at a disadvantage. Therefore, as long as there was no problem with Jingwan's body, Li Hongyuan was not in a hurry. At most, it would only take 2 or 3 days. You will have to suffer. Li Hongyuan said to Jingwan. Suffer? Not really. In fact, this feeling is quite novel. In her previous life, this kind of activity was very popular. Jingwan had participated in it once or twice. Of course, it was actually quite tiring occasionally. But it was different now. Everything was taken care of. It was just that it was inconvenient to wash up and there was no change of clothes. Originally, not to mention 2 or 3 days, even if it was a longer time without changing clothes, Jingwan had also experienced it in her previous life. Any discomfort could be forced to adapt. However, in this life, Jingwan was born into a good family. It was not a top-notch wealthy family. Her food and clothing were carefully taken care of. It was not that she did not change clothes for a few days, but she changed a few sets of clothes a day. For more than 10 years it was like this. Especially in Jin Wangfu, it was even more meticulous. Now she always felt that her body was a bit itchy. Things like habits, even if you were forced to change, it was not something that could be changed in a short time. However, when there was nothing to do, she would nestle in someone's arms and let him tickle her. It felt quite comfortable. Jingwan was comfortable, but Li Hongyuan was a bit tormented. Originally, when Jingwan was pregnant, he did not have many opportunities to eat meat. This time he had not eaten for a long time. Touching his wife's smooth and delicate skin, how could he not have any reaction? However, he still did not have the right time, right place and right people. At most he could kiss twice to satisfy his craving. On the 3rd day of staying in the same place, a shadow guard came to report that there was a group of dozens of people coming in their direction. From their attire, they looked like ordinary villagers. Including the things in their hands, they were all used by farmers. However, thinking about it, one would know how careless this disguise was. In this large piece of land, there were actually very few people. The nearest village was a few li away, and there were very few residents in the village. For dozens of young and strong men to appear out of nowhere, who would believe that there was nothing fishy? Even if it was the bandits of any mountain, it was impossible for them to be so orderly. These people, they really don't give up. Jingwan said coldly. It's just a deathbed struggle. Naturally, they want to come out and try their luck instead of continuing to guard a few roads and wait for rabbits. Are they sure that I'm a hindrance and can't go far? Even if Jingwan herself was very self-aware, if she was treated like this by her own people, it would be fine. However, it was unpleasant to be treated like this by those enemies. This is also the truth. Wan, don't bother about it. Li Hongyuan was still in the mood to tease her. Jingwan gently rolled her eyes at him. It's just that, are we unlucky or are they too lucky? Who knows? Let's go. Li Hongyuan directly carried Jingwan up, and his footsteps were not slow at all. While they were talking, the others quickly packed up the things that should be packed and quickly followed. Although there were some traces that they did not have time to deal with, it did not matter. There were several places where there were traces and they were deliberately left. Following the traces, they would only be going in circles. As for other places, it was impossible to find them unless they were very careful and professional. Moreover, they had already figured out the surroundings where they could hide, where they could have a good line of sight, and where they could not be found. It was easy to take them for a walk. However, it did not take long for them to find a problem. This group of people was not fooled because they actually had a hunting dog with them. The traces that they had just left were very fresh, and it was easy for the hunting dog to find them. Everyone's expression became serious. They went in circles and took the initiative to leave when they did not find them. Obviously, it was not going to work. If they did not want to tire themselves out, they could only get rid of the hunting dog. In this way, they would be completely bitten. In that case, let's kill them all. Li Hongyuan said lightly, but the content of his words was unusually cruel. However, no one thought that he was boasting. If they did not face it head-on, there were ways to not face it. Once they faced it, there were also ways to face it. They had already thought of a way, and naturally they had thought of a way. Without hesitation, they went straight to the place that they had prepared beforehand. On the ground, it was dangerous and narrow. It was a good place where one man can hold the pass against 10,000. However, although it was a good place, it could also be considered a dangerous place because there was only one way in and out. When they chose to go in and the outside road was left to the enemy, they had no other way to go except for victory. It was as if the back was against the cliff and the feet were on the clouds. The place was not big and there were vines hanging at the entrance. When they found this place, Jingwan was also there, but she did not go in to take a look. Now that she was there, it was really a little scary. However, Jingwan leaned on the innermost seat and looked around. The bows and arrows were made at the last minute. They were originally equipped with crossbows, but there were not many arrows left. Otherwise, they would not have needed these zero-hour bows. Although they only had a little more than 10 people and the number of the enemy was more than 5 to 6 times, Jingwan, who had no experience in this kind of situation, was not afraid at all. As long as they controlled it well, the possibility of annihilating the enemy and their side would be very high. The only problem was that they did not know if these people went back to find help, and the location and number of helpers were unknown. Therefore, they needed to end the battle quickly. Hurry, hurry, they are in front. The person who said this was quite excited and took the lead. A high position and a beautiful woman was in front of him, and she was waving at him. How could he not be excited? Not to mention that they might not be the target. First, there was no one around and no one would easily move around in this area. Second, if they did not have a guilty conscience, why would they avoid them from afar? Therefore, they were very confident. Standing behind the vines through the gaps, they saw everything. The 5 crossbows were already set up and they only needed to wait for these people to come closer. In just one round, at least 20 people would be killed. However, in the end, they were not blinded by the imminent victory. When they came closer, they did not see anything. If the hounds were not barking at a cluster of vines, they might have missed it. Therefore, they became cautious and stood up, using the nearby trees or stones as cover, and hid. However, Li Hongyuan's people were not lacking in patience. When the other side appeared one after another, they were still calm and waiting for more people to come closer. The battle last night was fierce enough and Jingwan did not see it but heard more. Now, perhaps it was not fierce, but seeing those people getting closer and closer, she could not help but hold her breath and her palms began to sweat. She was not afraid but nervous enough. Li Hongyuan stood beside Jingwan, and his expression was natural and relaxed, showing that he had a card up his sleeve. Li Hongyuan kissed Jingwan's forehead, but Jingwan did not seem to feel it and stared outside without blinking. Li Hongyuan suddenly felt a little funny but also a little unhappy. He pinched Jingwan's chin and with a little force, turned her around and then kissed her hard. Jingwan also did not expect that this bastard would still play this trick in such a situation, and she was so angry that she hit him with all her strength. With this ruckus, the tense atmosphere was gone. Originally, they could not hear any sound from the outside, but now they heard some movement. Startled, they first dodged and waited for a while but still did not see any movement. They thought in their hearts that they should not have weapons like bows and arrows, and then they thought about what if there was a way out. Maybe they had already run far away and they could not let the duck in their mouth fly away. No longer hesitating, they aggressively pounced. After the first arrow flew out, the second and third arrows flew out one after another. The arrows of the hand crossbows were relatively short, but the lethality was great. Moreover, the arrows were close to the body and occasionally one or two arrows would fly out, directly piercing through two people. The control was precise and there were no missed shots. Therefore, after this round, the harvest was more than expected. And these people of Zhang people were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves, and those at the back hurriedly retreated, afraid that if they were a step slower they would be unlucky. The hand crossbows were put away. The bows that were made temporarily were not so accurate, and because the arrows were wooden, the lethality was also much weaker. However, they were still calm and unhurried. They pulled the bow, aimed and released. The final result was at least 70%. These 50 to 60 people fell one by one, and if they were not dead they were injured. It was so tragic, but in the end they did not even see the shadow of the target. Even if they had been warned before that this Jin Qinhuang of Qiyuan was not a small matter and was very difficult to deal with, they must be careful. However, when they really faced him it was terrifying. There were less than 10 people who could still stand, and all their courage turned into nothingness. What high position, generous salary and beautiful women, they had to be alive to enjoy them. And now, the situation was that even if they had to pay with their lives, if they wanted to give this merit to their family, they had to be able to kill the target first. The problem was that if they went up now, they would only be sending themselves to death. In order to save their lives, they had to run quickly. Except for Li Hongyuan, Jingwan, Gong Mama and Gong Jiu, the rest came out from behind the vines. 2 were left behind to deal the finishing blow, and the rest quickly rushed out to chase after the few people who were running away. In the forest, because the people who were running away were scared out of their wits, and because they were not used to such an environment, they stumbled, rolled and crawled. The people who were chasing after them were running on flat ground and chose the shortest path to advance. In this way, even if the people behind were fewer than the people in front, the people in front were killed one by one. From the beginning to the end it took a very short time. After coming out from behind the vines, Jingwan looked at the scattered corpses. Her heart was beating a little faster, but it was better than expected. Let's go. Li Hongyuan put his arm around Jingwan. They did not know if there would be more people chasing after them, so they should not stay here for long. Chapter 576. There was no need to clean up this place. In any case, there was no need to worry about an epidemic in this location. Moreover, when the matter was settled, there would always be someone to deal with it. Even if Li Hongyuan was extremely unlucky and lost his life in the end, the people of Zhang would definitely come to clean up the mess. After all, the traces of their activities in the Qiyuan were too obvious. If they did not clean up the mess and angered the Qiyuan, it would be a disaster for them. However, it was obvious that if Li Hongyuan fell so easily, he would not be Li Hongyuan. As for whether there would be more hounds behind them, it was hard to say. However, even if there was nothing to be afraid of. There were only so many people from Zhang. Previously, at least half of them had died outside the kernel. Now they had to spread out and guard each road. In order to be absolutely successful, there would definitely be no less than 20 people. As a result, the number of people that could be deployed to search the mountain was very limited. There were already 50 to 60 people here. How many people would be left? Therefore, Li Hongyuan thought very clearly. As long as he was careful, the final result would be his victory. It was only a matter of time. If Jingwan was not by his side, he would have already turned the tables and directly went to find them. First, he had to ensure that Jingwan was absolutely safe. Only then could he retreat now. However, no one else appeared even after an hour had passed, so there shouldn't be anyone else coming. Li Hongyuan slightly narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the foot of the mountain. Under normal circumstances, even if no one went back and did not report, it was still dozens of people. As the person in charge, it was impossible to be indifferent. At the same time, he should have thought that it was very likely that they had met Prince Jin of the Qiyuan. Li Hongyuan's approximate location was clearly written. There was no reason for him to ignore it. Could it be that they knew that it was impossible to complete so they gave up? Jingwan guessed. The possibility is very low. After coming out of the call, as long as one of my people went out, it means that Zhang's matter has been exposed. Even if the identity of the shadow guards is sensitive, and they did not find the local garrison for the time being, sooner or later they will find those who are loyal to me in the court. If they wanted to give up, they should have done so at the first moment. Besides, the one who really wants me dead is Southern Qi. Zhang is at most a pawn. If Zhang is exposed and cannot complete the mission, then Southern Qi will attack Zhang before Qi Yuan does. On the other hand, if Zhang completes the mission, even if Qi Yuan's revenge, Southern Qi can still ask Southern Qi for help. So, if they kill Zhang, there is still a chance of survival. If they don't kill me, then there is only one path left. Li Hongyuan was such a dangerous person. He could not be used by Southern Qi, so he had to find a way to destroy him. In any case, Southern Qi's national strength was not inferior to Qi Yuan's. Even if they killed a prince of Qi Yuan, they would not be afraid. Getting rid of Li Hongyuan would reduce the danger. So, in fact, one could imagine the threat that Southern Qi posed to Zhang. So, not only would they not give up, but they would also become crazier at this time. The real situation was completely different from what they had expected. It made people wonder if there was something fishy going on. Uncontrollable things were what people hated the most. Li Hongyuan sent someone out to investigate the specific situation. They did not make any moves for the time being, but they would not stay in place and wait. That secret guard had been gone for nearly 4 hours, which was much longer than expected. However, he came back with good news. It turned out that the person in charge of the state of Zhang knew that it was impossible to complete the mission, but he didn't want to die. Therefore, while he arranged for his subordinates to continue searching for Li Hongyuan's whereabouts, he secretly slipped away and prepared to sneak back to the state of Zhang quietly. Before the news of the failure spread, he would take his family away. After leaving the state of Zhang, there would be a place for his family to settle down. Therefore, Li Hongyuan's previous plan was flawless, but he still missed a person's heart. He probably didn't expect that the person carefully selected by the state of Zhang to carry out the mission would be a coward when faced with a problem. He didn't care about the national interest at all. It was just that this person's luck was not very good. Because he was in a hurry to return to Zhang, he did not follow the original route of smuggling back. Instead, he took the official road. It must be known that there were troops stationed at the border. Unlucky people would not know how to arouse suspicion. With a little interrogation, they would be exposed. So how could they return? Although the number of troops stationed was not many, when they knew that Jin Qinhuang was in danger near them, how could they ignore it? So they immediately sent people to clean up the people of Zhang. And the person in charge of Zhang ran away by himself. The people left behind did not know anything about it. So they were all caught without knowing. The situation was reversed like this. To be honest, the appearance of a pig opponent, no matter who it was, they would be very happy. Including Li Hongyuan, his expression was slightly relaxed. He looked at Jingwan. He did not care. The main thing was Jingwan. The earlier the matter was over, the earlier Jingwan could relax. This kind of environment was harmful to her. Now that the matter was resolved, there was no need to hide anymore. They went down the mountain openly. During this period, she learned from the shadow guards that because the troops stationed at the border were cleaning up Zhang, some of Li Hongyuan's scattered subordinates had gathered. Among them were He Mei and Fu Rong. Both of them were injured. Fu Rong was more seriously injured. Because on the night of the breakout she pretended to be Jingwan. In fact, she was the one who proposed the strategy of luring the enemy. Fortunately, she did not suffer a fatal injury. She also did not lose all her limbs. If she slowly recuperated, there would be a day when she recovered. Jingwan sighed in her heart. Fu Rong was a rare person who valued friendship and righteousness. If she grew up in a normal environment, she should also be a woman of peerless beauty. Qi Yuan's troops were close at hand. There were at least 300 people. However, this number would only make people feel at ease. What is the name of this garrison? Li Hongyuan asked casually. Although there were only a few thousand troops stationed here, the highest-ranking officer was still a garrison, a 4th-grade official. The shadow guard said a name. And it was this name that made Li Hongyuan stop. The expression on his face was slightly serious. As soon as he stopped, the others stopped as well. What's wrong? Is there something wrong with this person? This person was right in front of them. If there was really something wrong with this person then. Jingwan's nerves instantly tensed up again. Li Hongyuan held her hand and was silent for a moment. He wanted to smooth things over, but there were some things that it was better to be mentally prepared in advance. And maybe he was just thinking too much. Did you see Sun Yilin before? Li Hongyuan asked. Replying to Master, I saw him. He also suffered some injuries and his consciousness is not very clear. At the mention of Sun Yilin, Jingwan suddenly understood why her husband asked this. It was because this garrison's surname was Sun, and the word in the middle of his name seemed to be the same as the current Duke Ding's. Although it was not a coincidence, it was very likely that he was a member of the Sun family. The Sun family was led by the Duke Ding's family. This position was too delicate. Moreover, Sun Yilin wanted Li Hongyuan to die. Yuan, you should have known about the Sun family, especially those in the officialdom. He had forgotten about this garrison's son, and the shadow guard beside him should not have forgotten about it. Yes, I have. There is no such person. Jingwan heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it should be just a coincidence. However, when she saw Li Hongyuan's expression, she swallowed the remaining half of her sigh. What's wrong? The minister of the Ministry of Rights is also surnamed Su. The implication was that Li Hongyuan already had doubts in his heart. It was as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat. Sun Yilin, you should have killed him directly. You should have killed him directly. Jingwan really regretted and blamed herself. She should not have completely reduced him to a prisoner and could not cause any trouble. It was impossible for him to pose a threat to her husband. Also, because of Sun Yijia's compassion, she only thought that no matter how he was punished, it would be enough to keep him alive. Li Hongyuan was the one who disliked Sun Yilin the most. However, when he saw Jingwan's current state, he completely forgot about Sun Yilin. In particular, when he saw that there was a trace of blood on Jingwan's lips, he did not know where she had bitten. His thumb brushed across her lips. Wan, everything is just speculation. However, if this speculation was true, then they already had no way to escape. Everything that had happened before at this time was actually just a small matter. The hundreds of people who had originally made them feel at ease had now become their prison, making it impossible for them to escape even if they had wings. Wan, you don't need to blame yourself. Li Hongyuan said softly. In the blink of an eye, he had already sorted out all the clues. As a member of the Sun family, they would certainly support Prince Kong. As long as they knew the danger of Li Hongyuan, they would think of a way to get rid of him at the first opportunity. Their thoughts were even stronger than those of the Southern Qi people. Sun Yilin didn't even need to do anything. He didn't need to reveal his identity. He only needed to let this guard know the tip of Li Hongyuan's iceberg. That was enough. He didn't even need to give any evidence. The people of Zhang wanting to kill him was the best evidence. He didn't need to give this move now. He only needed to give a vague hint before Li Hongyuan left the capital. Li Hongyuan explained in detail. So, it doesn't matter if Sun Yilin is still alive or not. Speaking to this point, he suddenly laughed lightly. Previously, he had felt that he had overestimated Sun Yilin. He really hadn't played any role in this matter. Perhaps he had only formed a relationship with the Southern Qi Kingdom at the beginning and given them a little hint. However, it turned out that his true killing move was not in the Southern Qi Kingdom. Rather than saying that he had thrown himself into the Southern Qi Kingdom, it was better to say that he had used the Southern Qi Kingdom. This plan was actually very simple. However, no matter what the process was, it was not very difficult to reach this point. Perhaps everything was within Sun Yilin's expectations. As long as I leave the capital and come here, it doesn't matter if he participated or not. Even if he dies, the plan can still proceed. Li Hongyuan thought to himself that it was no wonder he was the youngest Grand Secretary to be promoted from First Minister in his previous life. Because of his different experiences, he had grown faster than in his previous life. If it weren't for his relationship with Wan, he would still be willing to continue using such a talented person. However, there was no if in everything. Looking at the hundreds of Qiyuan soldiers coming closer and closer, they were all dressed in the same uniform with shining weapons and bows in their hands. They were moving faster and faster, and even the bows on their backs had been taken off. No matter how one looked at it, they did not have good intentions. Yuan, hurry up and leave. You are their real target. As long as you can escape. Jingwan anxiously pushed him away. Wan, Li Hongyuan softly interrupted her. I won't leave even if I can. Wherever you are is where my heart belongs. You have to know that as long as you are in their hands I will definitely walk into their trap. Moreover, if they use you to threaten me, then I will do anything for them before I can save you. Jingwan's eyes instantly reddened and her teeth chattered. If it weren't for me, if it weren't for me, if it weren't for you, there would be no meaning in restarting my life. Wan, you should blame me. I am the one who dragged you into this. However, even if it were 100 or 1,000 times over, I would still do it. So don't say such things. Your husband will be sad. Li Hongyuan's fingertips brushed past Jingwan's eyes. As long as I have you, I can accept any failure. So Wan, will you die with me? Jingwan said without hesitation. Her only regret was that she would not be able to accompany them after the baby was born. However, it did not matter. Jingwan believed that they would still be a family in their next life. After making preparations, Jingwan was no longer so nervous. Looking at the Qiyuan soldiers who had not yet come close, there was nothing to say. Her guess was the truth. Li Hongyuan and the others were surrounded. Although they had all heard Li Hongyuan and Jingwan's words, they still dutifully protected them. They held their weapons and faced outwards, showing a defensive posture. Even if they were faced with hundreds of arrows, they were still too weak. Guard Sun walked out. He looked like a decent person. It seemed that he really had not done any evil deeds. However, people nowadays were too good at pretending. The so-called one's appearance comes from one's heart was not so reliable. As the saying goes, one may know a person's face but not his heart. Guard Sun stared at Li Hongyuan for a moment and suddenly cupped his hands. This subject greets your highness. Duke Dingwa, there is no such person within the 5 servers. Which branch of the Sun clan do you belong to? Li Hongyuan asked faintly. Hearing your highness say this, it seems that you have a good understanding of the Sun clan. Under normal circumstances, even if it was a prince who held great power, he would not go to such a detailed understanding, right? After all, it was no longer the time when the aristocratic families ruled the world. Halfway through, he clenched his hand into a fist and coughed a few times. He was different from what Jingwan had seen before. He was wearing a large hood that almost covered his eyes. When he lowered his head, his face could not be seen. When he raised his head, there was a mask on his face. He was very calm before, but now he was covering it up. Jingwan glanced at Guard Sunday. In order to cooperate well, it was normal to cover it up. I really want to see your highness die. At this time, if I don't say something, I will feel very uncomfortable. After realizing that your highness is not simple, I know that it is not easy to deal with your highness. I can only overestimate you. After all, you have the ability to deceive the world. If I underestimate you, I am afraid that I will die without a burial place. Therefore, I must not act blindly without thinking. I must be patient and wait quietly. I also need a careful plan to win in one strike. Don't look at how happy Wan Fengfei and the others were before. I didn't think that they would succeed at all. The truth is as I expected. However, to reach this point, in my opinion, it is not as difficult as I expected. Sun Yilin and Li Hongyuan looked at each other. His eyes were covered by the hood, dark and frightening. In the end, I still won. Is that so? You are not sure? Li Hongyuan asked faintly. Sun Yilin's gaze shifted slightly and landed on Jingwan. Wan, come with me, okay? What I said before is still valid. It's broad daylight, don't dream. Quickly wake up. Jingwan said expressionlessly. Sun Yilin knew that if Jingwan had any emotional reaction to him before, there would be nothing left now. He won. Did he really win? His own fate seemed to have changed from liking her. Because he liked her, she was the one that Jin Qinhuang had long set his eyes on, so she was ruthlessly suppressed and then pushed to a dead end step by step. Could he blame her? In fact, Sun Yilin knew that he should not blame her. He was not wrong. However, sometimes a person's emotions were not so easy to control. Therefore, Sun Yilin admitted that when he was ruthlessly tortured and driven mad, he blamed her. The more it was like this, the deeper his obsession, the more he wanted to get. If she is the object of competition, it seems that I really can't win against you. Sun Yilin saw clearly that she would really follow him from the blue sky to the yellow springs. It really makes people jealous. Wan Wan is not an object. You treat her as an object and fight for it. Sun Yilin, now I am very suspicious. Do you really like her? Li Hongyuan frowned and looked at Sun Yilin as if he was re-evaluating her. Sun Yilin was startled. He liked the Luo family's third young lady. This point he had always believed. Wait, Luo family's third young lady? Young Master Yilin, why are you still talking nonsense with them? If you really like this Jin Qingwang Fei, just kill the others and snatch her. Guard Sun said this, but his eyes flashed with ridicule. The dignified Ding Guogong Fu's legitimate son, how honorable was he? He actually kept thinking about a married woman. Yes, this kind of person, no matter how capable he was, there was a limit. However, Sun Yilin did not pay attention to him. Guard Sun's face was somewhat green. He raised his hand. Get ready, who allowed you to make decisions without permission? Sun Yilin looked over. Guard Sun's face stiffened, his eyes somewhat unfocused, and then he ordered to put down the arrows. Puppet Gu? Gongjia whispered softly. The nearby people all stopped in their ears. Just by hearing the name they knew what it was used for. In a flash, Jingwan thought, could it be that Sun Yilin also wanted to use this kind of goo on her? Wan Wan, you really don't want to consider it? If you agree, I can even give Jin Qingwang a way out. Whether he liked it or not, he did not want to pursue it. A way out is the same as living a life worse than death. Jingwan sneered. That's still living. Isn't living good? Just like you, like a rat living in the dark? You used to be the capital's #1 young master. Do you think you are very good now? Jingwan ridiculed. In the end, he was once a proud son of heaven. Jingwan's words pierced his heart until it was dripping with blood, okay? Not at all. Since that's the case, then there's nothing to say. In any case, I can't get your heart. It's enough that your body is left behind. Sun Yilin turned around, send them on their way. Although they were already mentally prepared, but when it came to the end, facing hundreds of fully drawn arrows, thinking that they would be pierced into a sieve, they still couldn't help but feel some fear. However, none of them closed their eyes. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan's hand and Jingwan also tightly held on to him. Li Hongyuan squeezed her fingers. Wan Wan, don't be afraid. His eyes were serene as he said a few words that Jingwan didn't understand. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.